So today we're going to do an introduction to the user group, and we've got Tom Hickling with us today. So Tom's going to be presenting about the roadmap. So that's some very good information to hear. And then we've got Anthony Mashford from NetApp, who's going to tell us sort of NetApp integration with AVD. We've got Ryan, who's not here at the moment, and hoping he's on his way. Just messaged him. If not, anyone can talk about what they want. We'll skip that session. I don't care. And then we've got Ben Ward, who's going to talk about from Agile, who's basically going to talk about his AVD versus sort of Citrix and VMWare, which is going to be a very interesting conversation. And that's going to be it. So we're basically going to have pizza. So we're going to order that shortly. So is anyone here like vegetarian? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we'll order some vegetarians, and if anyone's got a preference, let us know, and we'll order some. So. Huh? One at the back. On the back. So you want spicy, right? Okay. Okay. So a few introductions to myself. So my name is Neil McLaughlin. I founded this UK user group in August 2020. I've been around for a while now, so I've been pretty much all my working career in IT. So nearly 25 years I worked out the other day, which makes me feel very, very old. So I currently work for a company called Nerdio. I'm the UK field CTO. So we sort of specialise in Azure virtual desktop deployments. So that's all I do day in, day out. So I live in Azure these days. I'm also the co-founder of the AVD community, which is a worldwide community with user groups like this. So we have these worldwide in about 40 countries last time I checked. So we were going to try and integrate everything together, but time has not allowed us to do that. But we're hoping to pick it up in the future. I'm also a Microsoft MVP as well. So this is my second year as a Microsoft MVP. You want to follow me on Twitter, you can go to Virtual Mike, and I'll see the WD community, which is where we post all our sort of community stuff as well. Also my personal website, which I don't get time to update, and also the WD community. I need to update that because that's our old website. We've now renamed ourselves as the Virtual Desktops community to cover more stuff apart from AVD, stuff like Intune, Windows 365, all this kind of stuff. And that's my LinkedIn if you want to offer me a job with lots and lots of money. And that's my email address if you want to contact me about anything related to your virtual desktop. Shabazz, do you want to introduce yourself to everyone? Come on.
Hi, I'm Shabazz Dar, 15 years working IT. First of those years I was working with Dave in the front row there. So 8 years working with cloud. Obviously work for Net Company. So this is our Leeds office. So we're nice enough to sponsor this location. I run another user group called Bradford Cloud User Group, which is the next city on. Recently started working with Neil on helping manage the Azure Virtual Desktop one, a topic and very close to my heart. I'm also a Microsoft MVP. I was awarded in, I want to say October, September. The Enterprise Mobility, that's my Twitter and my LinkedIn. I do YouTube content. I am IT Geek is my alias, so feel free to have a look. And yeah, hope everyone has a nice time and enjoys the event. I'm going to be back doing the team stuff, so enjoy.
Cheers, Shabazz.
We'll just compliment your family.
So Shabazz actually presented at our very, very first event. It's been quite an amazing journey to see Shabazz because he started doing his community stuff pretty much. That was his very, very start beginning, and since then he's got the Microsoft MVP. He's written books. He's started the Bradford Cloud User Group as well. So he's a very, very inspiring person. So I just wanted to put that out there to say he's done an amazing job. So good job, Shabazz. And I'm very, very happy to have him do this with me as well because if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here today. Because he let us use Net Company for hosting this, so really, really good. I'm happy to have him here. So we've basically upped our game massively by having him aboard. And I just want to put a big thanks to Kurt Ryan. So Kurt's been running the user group with me from the beginning, essentially. So he pinged me after I did the first one. So Kurt used to sort of help doing the user group stuff. So he used to work for NetApp, and he's now gone to start his own company, which has been running for the past couple of years, called Busby IN. So I just wanted to put that out there and say thanks to him, because it wouldn't be what it is today without his sort of help and assistance and helping promote stuff as well. So if you're interested, that's what he started to do. So he started this sort of app on the phone, which basically helps people if they have a crash or something, it alerts somebody. So and he's basically now left NetApp to do that as his full-time job. So it's really, really impressive what he's doing. So just want to say thanks to him for everything that he's done. And also there's two people who, again, we wouldn't be here today without them. One of them was here today, Tom. So Tom and Christian massively helped us when we first started all the community stuff. Obviously, we started when AVD wasn't really, it was the very, very beginning. It was all PowerShell based. It was only based in certain regions and stuff like that. And we started a community because we saw what it was going to be. And sort of Tom and Christian have both massively helped us. They helped us sort of present at sort of some of the Microsoft events. They helped us sort of write content and stuff like that and promote us on social media. So I just wanted to say a massive thank you to them because again we won't be here today about this as well. So cheers, Tom. And Christian, if you're watching this as well, which you're probably not because you're probably asleep or whatever time it is in the US at the moment. So what to expect? So we meet once a month, but obviously we're now going to change that. So I think we're still going to do monthly virtually, but once a quarter we're going to definitely come here because this is like an awesome venue, and if I have to pay for it, it costs me lots of money, but we get it for free. So it's a no-brainer, and you get free beer. So why not? So we present latest AVD news. We need to change that. Obviously we're using Teams and in-person physical as well, so it's always going to be hybrid, so those people can come on Teams if they can't make it, which I appreciate some people can't. And we always record the slides and all the events, so we put it up to YouTube as well. So if you can't make it, don't worry, you may be watching this on YouTube in about a week's time. Also, so yeah, look, we can now remove this. So I put the slide in, basically we can now remove this. So I'm not sure when the next one's going to be because who knows what's going to happen over the next few weeks or months or whatever. So this could be the last physical one for a while, depending on what happens with COVID and lockdown and stuff. But we'll see. Hopefully we can have one next quarter, but we'll see. So we always are looking for presenters. When I first started this user group, I found it very easy to get presenters. I was probably booked 3 months in advance. It's become increasingly difficult as sort of the AVD service evolved, because when it first started, there was literally every week, there was new stuff being added literally every week, and there was a lot of stuff to talk about. Obviously, as it becomes sort of more mainstream products, that's kind of slowed down a bit, but it's probably now to like, I don't know, 1 or 2 major releases every month. And so it's hard to get new content. So if you do want to speak about something, obviously it has to be generally related to AVD. It doesn't have to be sort of specifically AVD, but if it's around AVD like FS Logic or something like that, then please just let me know. We're always looking at presenters and look at what's happened to people when they get up and they start presenting. I started presenting 2 years ago, and my career is just skyrocketed. And so I did that, and there's a lot of people in this room who've done exactly the same thing. So if you want to present, just let us know, and we'll happily sit down with you. I don't care. It doesn't have to be 10 minutes. It can be 5 minutes. It can be half an hour. It doesn't matter. As long as you get your content out there, that's all good for you. So we've got a Slack channel as well. So if you're interested in Azure virtual desktop stuff and you want to get instant answers, just join our Slack channel. That's the URL there. I know Tom goes on there regularly. I probably go on there probably a couple of times during the week just to have a look, see what's going on. So still growing, still people posting on there. So if you need instant answers and stuff for people who work for Microsoft or AVD experts, then jump on there and you'll get a response pretty quickly. So we always do this slide about what's new in the sort of world of Azure Virtual Desktop. So again, not that many releases this month, but it's some pretty good new releases. So one thing I wanted to talk about was the AVD community relaunch. So I started the AVD community off quite a long time in August 2020. I had humongous visions for doing what it's doing. Unfortunately, personal stuff and time and stuff, it just never got to where it wanted to be. So we're going to kickstart 2022 to get it to where we want it to be. What the original vision that we had for it is what you see on the board. So newsletters, video roundups, podcasts, sort of study series, YouTube stuff, all that stuff. It used to be me on my own, Stefan, another guy, and a few other people as well. We've now got 5 people in total, so we're hoping to massively up our game in 2022. So we took a bit of a breather for the past month because I know people are very busy with Christmas and all that kind of stuff, but we're relaunching in 2022 with a bang. So lots of articles coming, lots of video stuff coming, lots of podcast stuff in, but we're hoping to do some really, really cool stuff. So I'm going to talk about the Nerdio news. So I work for Nerdio, so I really, because obviously Nerdio paid for the food, so I need to talk about Nerdio. So essentially, we released version 3.3 of our product. So Nerdio basically was launched around August 2020. So we basically, I think it's March 2020 when we launched our first product. Same time to COVID hit, and every month we add lots of awesome new features. We've got a really good set of developers. So these are some of the new features. So we've got FS Logic app masking. So that's built into the product now. So you can literally go into the feed, discover your apps on session hosting, create your rules within Nerdio, so you don't have to go and create them outside as well. So really cool feature, works really well.
Is that doing the deployment as well now?
Yep. So basically what we do, we discover the apps, you select what apps you want, it builds it out for you, it sticks it on the network share for you, and then every time the service boot, we just
also granularly deploy them to different sets of users and machines, etc.
Yep. So works really cool. We've got RAM auto scaling. So Nerdio, we've got a really advanced auto scaling engine where we basically scale based on sort of lots of different trigger points, so CPU usage, available sessions, so we can now do that in RAM auto scaling as well. So if you've got sort of applications which are very sort of specific on RAM, because different people have different use cases and they want to scale based on different trigger points, so we can now do it on RAM if they need to. We've got custom RBAC roles, so if you've got people who want to different RBAC models within Nerdio, we can do that now as well. And we've got availability, which I started to type something there, and what it was, availability zone selection. So we can select the availability zones when we deploy host boards as well. Lots of other cool stuff, that's the full feature there. So that's the URL as well to go to the release notes, which show you all the products there as well.
Neil, can I ask one question? So the RAM auto scaling, what about CPU auto scaling? I'm here all week. Because we found we're CPU intensive, not RAM intensive.
Yep, so we do CPU as well. So we have 5 different trigger points.
I'll get them a bit.
Okay. So what we're adding in our next release is the availability to do CPU and RAM auto scaling as well. Okay, so you can select multiple schedules, so you don't have to use one or the other. You can choose multiple ones at once as well. Okay. So that's what we do. We're doing Azure Stack HCI integration, so that's coming in our next release. So you'll be able to fully manage Azure Stack HCI using Nerdio. So we allow, you basically have to set up obviously Azure Stack HCI, and then we use Azure Arc as the integration point within Nerdio. And then from Nerdio, you can fully manage those deployments, so you can create all the images, all this kind of stuff as well. So that's coming, that's something we're working on at the moment. Multiple auto scale trigger points, which you mentioned. And so in our last release, we released active disaster recovery, where basically you can split your host boards into separate regions. So you can do one in UK South and UK West, and there will also be a load balance between those 2 regions. A few customers have asked us, can we do active passive? So we're doing that. So we're basically now we use to have standby DR if you need that as well. So that's coming on next release as well.
And sorry to ask another question.
Okay.
And it's probably more for Tom. The Azure Stack HCI stuff I saw came about. How many customers in reality are ready to receive that? Because it sounds fantastic. All of a sudden, AVD to on-prem, brilliant. But in reality,
yeah, that's a good point. In reality, at least in
conceptually, it's great.
Conceptually, it's great. What we find is, which is probably what you find and what you're running anyway, is you've got another hypervisor, some other hardware on premises running tens of thousands of Citrix VMs, let's just say, or VMware, and you're not going to suddenly switch that to HCI just in order to deploy AVD onto it.
So AVD on VMware, for example, I don't want to move my VMware to Azure.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the reason why we're doing it, because we've had a lot of customers ask for it.
Sure.
Okay, so obviously we speak to a lot of customers and they're a bit nervous about going all in on Azure, which you can imagine, that's fine. So we get a lot of customers saying, can we do on-prem with Nerdio? And this is the answer. I mean, for me, I guess the only problem is Azure Stack HCI is not cheap, right? I mean, I'm not looking at the detail, but correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, I think you look at a minimum 100k on kit.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest, how much
so I think obviously certain manufacturers only needs to be on the approved list, and then things like big beefy servers like 396 gigs of RAM and stuff like that. So you're looking at, I reckon, at least 100 grand investment, and you need 2 of them. So it's not very cheap, but for those customers who need it, it's there.
Oh, great.
So also we've launched a community program as well. So we've launched the MVP. Can anyone guess what that sounds like? So the MVP program is for sort of recognising people who do stuff in community or Canadian. So pretty similar to another person or company. So we're pretty similar to that, where they will do blogging, do stuff on social media, stuff like that as well. So we're going to be announcing the very first 3 of them. Hopefully this week or next week, we're not too sure yet. So very, very excited to see what we do with that. AVD Tech Fest. So if you're not aware, so AVD Tech Fest was the very first conference which was specifically tailored for Azure Virtual Desktop. So we had one recently over a few months ago, which was very, very successful. It had over 1,000 people registered, and that was obviously virtual. So next one's going to be in Amsterdam. Huh? Yeah, I thought you might be, James. So that's on the 20th to the 21st of April in Amsterdam, in Schiphol, Amsterdam, I believe it is. So, yeah,
Needs a fly.
So make sure you get registered for that, and that's going to be a really, really, really awesome event. Of course, NetApp are diamond sponsors as well, so I'll shove NetApp diamond for us as well. So. And we've got a new book as well. So Ryan is supposed to be here. I don't know where he is, so I've messaged him. So Ryan's written a book called Mashford Azure Virtual Desktop. So that's going to be released in the next few months. So I was actually the technical reviewer for that book, so it's been quite good. So it's loosely based on the AZ140 exam. So some good content in there. So if you want to learn about Azure Virtual Desktop and want to read it, definitely check that out. Put the link in the slide there, which I can send out the slides afterwards as well. So also just so you're aware as well, so there's an urgent FS logic update that you need to deploy, so the security fixes in there as well. So if you're using FS logic, so make sure you update that to fix those as well. But you'll also be updating often, always as well. So big thing is the public preview of the Azure AD Kerberos for Azure AD storage. So a lot of people have been waiting for this, and it's finally here. So I've been testing it, works really, really well, quite easy to set up. So at the moment, there's a bit of limitation where your users have to be hybrid, so be wary of that. So you do still need domain controllers today, but you don't need to have line of sight for those domain controllers. Okay, so previously you could only use the Azure AD join on your hosts, but it didn't support FS logics. This is here to fix that. So think of a scenario where you have remote sites and you don't want to set up VPNs and you still want to use all this stuff. This enables you to do that. So I believe in sometime Q1 next year, Tom, is that right? Where they're going to lift that restriction on hybrid users?
Probably Q2.
Q2, okay. So,
Q2.
and that will mean basically, the biggest complaint we get from customers is, I'm setting up I'm a brand new company. Why am I deploying a domain controller? Okay, that's the biggest complaint that we get from customers. So this fixes that. So this can enable you to have Azure AD set up, and then you can use your join your session host of Azure AD and have your FS logic profile sitting on the Azure AD storage as well. So you don't need a domain controller at all. Your identity is Azure AD. Okay, that's the world that we're going to. So I think it's going to be a long time, because obviously you've got a lot of applications who need that LDAP functionality. Obviously those applications which just have Kerberos authentication, we're good to go. But those ones who need sort of LDAP calls and stuff like that, they're still going to need a domain controller around for a while. But this is a massive step forward, so really looking forward to see what it takes. Any further comments on that, Tom?
No.
Good. Okay, and that's the end of the news for this month. So, Tom, do you want to come up? So, Tom Hickling works for Microsoft, so he's going to present us with the roadmap of what's coming for the Azure Virtual Desktop Service.
Should I plug this in here?
Yeah, just unplug mine and plug it in. You need the USB adapter.
What is it?
USB-C to HDMI.
Right. USB-C will be right.
Okay, cool. There you go.
Oh, brilliant.
Plug that in. Do you want a clicker?
No, that's right. I've got my little clicker here on my pen.
Actually, this one's plugged in, so you may want to
okay.
put this one. You can use it anyway.
Yeah, I'll use it.
If it works. You may work. If not, you can use yours. No.
Yeah,
Right. Okay.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so my name's Tom Hickling. I work for Microsoft. As of Monday, I started a new role in the engineering team as a feature PM. Prior to that, I was a program manager in a particular team that worked with our biggest customers to deploy AVD, but also predominantly to get their feedback to make the product better. So I'm now effectively a customer of the team I left, and will be developing. The area I'll be responsible for is the expansion of what we refer to as the control plane, so the service, effectively. Now, I've been at Microsoft for 6 years. Prior to that, I worked for a number of companies in and out of end user computing, so predominantly Citrix. I came to Microsoft thinking I'm getting out of end user computing forever. And I joined Microsoft as a cloud solution architect, which is basically working with some of our large customers on anything Azure related. So it was fantastic because there's a list as long as your arm of services in Azure that you can go and play with and go and deploy. And then Citrix released Citrix Cloud, and I got pulled straight back in again because in Microsoft, at that point, nobody knew what Citrix was. They didn't know what end user computing was, besides a few niche people. Nobody knew what it was. So I got pulled back in and became, I suppose, a specialist for Citrix Cloud. One of my customers back then was Aviva, and I remember coming to visit you down in London.
Still there.
Sorry?
It's still there.
Still there? Good. Glad to hear it. And then I've had a number of roles dedicated to AVD, and in fact dedicated to what predated AVD, which was not just WVD. We had a product called RDMI, Remote Desktop Modern Infrastructure, which was actually a partner solution. So it wasn't meant to go direct to customers. And we just saw that customers were asking for this, so we rebranded it to Windows Virtual Desktop. It then became a customer-facing product. And obviously, since then, we've renamed it to Azure Virtual Desktop. And just, I suppose, for clarity, the reason that we renamed that, was to focus the attention on Azure, or Azure, however you want to pronounce it. This is not Windows. So what we've done, and in fact, there's some slides later that show that we've decoupled the relationship between the overall capability, RDS for that matter, from Windows Server, and have re-architected the whole lot and moved it into native Azure products. The first and most important one is a thing called Azure App Service. So Azure App Service is this global web hosting platform, and we've got lots of customers whose entire business is based upon Azure App Service. So what we've done is we've moved into Azure App Service as as a platform that we run on, and that opens up a whole host of benefits to our customers. Hopefully, we will see some of those in a minute. So if you want to follow me, Twitter and LinkedIn, I've got a website, which again, much like Neil, I just don't have the time to update anymore. So I think it was Tuesday, Neil asked me to come and present here, so I haven't really got a massive amount of slides or anything. I kind of knocked these together on the train up here. So this first slide is just to demonstrate that there's a lot of changes that happen or go into the AVD product. And that is because, like I said, we are now a customer of Azure itself as a platform, as opposed to Windows. So in the old days, RDS got updated every version of Windows that came out, so you'd be waiting 4 or 5 years. That is no longer the case here. And in Azure, we are not running on hundreds and hundreds of Windows machines. Like I said, we decoupled that and moved it into Azure App Service. And what that means is all of these features get dropped into that platform. Now, there are... There's the TV is going to go off now. Is there a button for the TV itself? Oh, here's this. Oh, no.
Yeah, it's that one.
Okay, I'm just going to press any button. There we go.
I don't know what the other one though.
Oh, is it? Same one? Yeah. Yeah, so I was just saying, so down, ignore the dates there, that's just basically when those features have gone live, but we actually have a weekly release pipeline. So we use our own products, we use Azure DevOps, and we've got some internal capabilities that go in front of Azure DevOps, but we use Azure DevOps to release our capabilities every single week. Now we might have a big feature like Neil said, or we might just have some bugs that are fixed, or we might switch on some features with some feature flags that are just sort of auditing sort of usage. But the point here, like I said, just to stress, this is how we get lots of features out into the product at a very, very quick cadence that was never at all possible before. So let's just have a look at some of the things that we've released, and then we'll look a little bit at the roadmap. Now, feel like ask any questions and interrupt me. But as part of my new role, I'm very, very keen on understanding genuine feedback, things you want it to do better, or things that it's not doing. You know, feel free to shout out. So there's a whole long list. I'm not necessarily going to go through every single one of these, but there's a few things that are, I suppose, perhaps more relevant or interesting than the others. The blue things on here are things that have been released in roughly the last, it does say 6 months, that's probably 9 months, maybe a year now. And the green are things that are in preview at this point in time. If you did have customers in various places around the world, we have rolled out our gateway service, the control plane effectively, to that list there. So we've recently gone into places like Switzerland, the UAE, Canada. We've also got, there's two services in Azure, in AVD. There's the gateway service and then the metadata. The metadata is where we store the information relevant to your deployments. Now that's not in every single Azure region, that we also have the gateway. But that is also expanding. So we've rolled out currently to 4, in fact, that is 4, 4 what we refer to as geographies. So not specific Azure regions, but we just refer to them as geographies, which is typically the US, the UK. Now the UK has 2 regions, so we are in both of those, but the US, for example, we've got something like 7 or 8 regions, and we're not in every single region, but we have a presence in those geographies. And of course China, if you had customers over in China. If we move on to service administration, I think one of the things that got the most interest was this capability called Start VM on Connect. So this is the capability of having users power on their VMs at the point that they need it. So prior to this, IT had to predict when the VMs should be started and use a whole host of automation tools, either in AVD or in Azure natively, to go and power those on. If IT says, right, we'll power on 8:30, and yet the user is running late, starts at 9:30, that's wasted Azure charges, whether they're not using that virtual machine. In like manner, if they started early and the VM wasn't powered on, then there's going to be an unhappy customer. So this gives the user the power to power on exactly when they need it. And you just go into the client, click on the icon, and it sits there for 3 or 4 minutes whilst that VM's powered on, and then connects it through to it. Neil mentioned Azure Stack HCI, but there's a couple of slides in a minute. But obviously that's very important for those customers who do want that locality down into their own on-premise locations. Now, you're right that we don't have lots and lots of customers asking for this because they're already running extensive end-user computing estates on other types of hardware, and we don't see many customers thinking we want to move from like ESX or whatever it might be onto HI just for this workload. But we do have lots of customers who are new, or they've got a bespoke project that they need some hardware for. This is ideal for that. We released into preview an auto-scaling service. Now this today is still quite limited, and it's this capability of having the platform manage the power management of all of these virtual machines. Now today, it only uses user load, so it doesn't incorporate resource usage. Now that's a feature that is going to be coming in a later release of our auto-scaling service. The number one asked for feature is support for Azure AD joins. So Neil mentioned that earlier. So we have released, we have 3 phases of capability here. The first is what we've released, which is phase 1, which is very simply just joining VMs to Azure Active Directory and then if you wanted to, enrolling them into Intune. Intune will become the de facto mechanism for managing all of these virtual machines. We have 2 additional phases, and we'll go on to what those look like in a minute. MSIX app attached, that's been out for some time. Trusted launch, Windows 11, improvements in Teams and FS Logics, multimedia redirections, the capability of redirecting down to the local device. Other people like Citrix have been able to do that for a long time, to be fair. Screen capture protections. This is the ability to hide or prevent the malicious or even accidental sharing of information, data that's running in your session, if you've got Teams, Zoom, whatever it might be. And it also prevents people taking the snippet of the screen. So when we detect that the snippet tool is being run up, the AVD screen will either go black or it will just go transparent. And the resulting snippet will show back. So there's no way of getting data. And that obviously can't prevent people taking photos with a camera, with a phone, but this does prevent predominantly accidental sharing of information when you're in a call and you're in the background, you've got an AVD session running. And then RDP short path for managed networks. Now this is this capability of connecting your infrastructure, on-premise infrastructure, up into Azure using something like ExpressRoute. Now lots of customers have that anyway for connectivity up into Azure. We will use that connection to connect you to your virtual machines. And we'll go on in the next slide just to look at what that looks like.
Tom,
yes.
I've got a quick question.
Yes.
Someone's asked, web client enhancement says mic redirection. What does this exactly mean? Should I assume that Teams audio call is supported in the web client?
So that will be coming at some point. We don't have an actual date for that, but that will be coming at some point in the hopefully not so distant future.
Yeah, thank you.
So what's a managed network then? A managed network is either using ExpressRoute or a site-to-site VPN. So something that you manage into Azure. ExpressRoute is our enterprise-grade capability. VPN is obviously going across the internet, so it's subject to whatever's going on the internet at any one point in time. So if you have those, then we might as well make use of them. So this is what the connection effectively looks like. So we have an AVD client on the left-hand side. We have our gateway in the middle that's obviously accessible on the internet, and we have the session host on the right-hand side, or your right-hand side. Now, when this session host boots up, it actually reaches out to our control plane to establish just brokering communications. Okay, so it's basically saying, I'm here ready to accept a connection. And that traffic is encrypted using a certificate that we deploy onto the gateway. When your AVD client connects, the first thing it does is it establishes a very similar connection, but going the other direction to our gateway. Now, both of these, like I said, sorry, the second one is encrypted using the same mechanism. So it's a TLS 1.2 encrypted tunnel through our gateway, and both sides of that are encrypted using that certificate that we manage. When you go and actually click on the icon to establish a connection, that RDP traffic is also encrypted using a certificate that we deploy but we don't manage on the session hosts, and it's effectively going through that first tunnel. So the traffic is encrypted twice. That's how we achieve enhanced level of security when this is on the internet. So obviously the only mechanism for getting to these VMs today without short path is this mechanism here. So if we detect that you have ExpressRoute, then we are going to utilize that connection. So the point here is that should be the lowest latency connection from your location up to those virtual machines rather than going across the internet. So if you have that, we'll use it to improve the user experience. This was designed to improve the user experience, but obviously it has a security benefit because that traffic is now off the internet. It's still encrypted, but it's not inside of that first encrypted stream. So we mentioned Azure Stack, HCI. The use case, much like Neil said here, is if you have data sovereignty, if you have latency issues, and you want the virtual machines close to your users, or to your data, or to whatever else it might be on premises, this is the solution for that. It's integrated obviously with the Azure portal, so you will see your host pools on premises, in the same user experience as you do in the Azure. You probably know what HCI is. Think of Nutanix as that kind of capability, but obviously coming from Microsoft, integrated with Azure, which is the main differentiator here. The user experience is exactly the same today. So you've got your end user devices connect through our gateway, through our control plane, to either session host running in Azure or session host now running on HCI. Now today, that is going across the internet, through our control plane, down to those virtual machines. So it is a little bit of a lengthy process to get there. What we are working on is the previous slide, so short path for HCI. So your users will effectively just be connecting locally. So that will be the ultimate in terms of user experience, because you're staying local and the connection is going directly to those virtual machines. There will still be an element of brokering to the control plane because that's the brains of it all, but the actual RDP traffic will be going directly to those virtual machines.
Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, no worries.
Can you switch on hardware acceleration without using an NVIDIA SKU?
Well, NVIDIA is all about GPUs as opposed to hardware acceleration. Was that the question? Was it about GPU?
Yeah, can you switch on hardware acceleration without using an NVIDIA SKU? So do you have to have an NVIDIA?
Well, you would need NVIDIA or AMD GPUs if you wanted to do enhanced graphics effectively. So each of the VMs that have those NVIDIAs in are basically, NVIDIAs or the AMD GPUs are shared up into the sessions in whatever factor the virtual, or whatever size the virtual machine is.
Okay.
Does that kind of answer it?
I'll find out.
All right.
What we're going to probably ask is if people can unmute themselves and ask you questions.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
Tom, with
Yes.
regard to short path, how have you actually seen it taken up? Because especially if you're changing the back-end hosts, the IP addresses of those, we've always found that proxying everything makes it far simpler, that you can make as many changes to the back-end as you want, because you don't obviously have to open up more new subnets or anything like that. How's the take-up actually been on short path? I know Neil's been a big advocate of it, but I've always felt that, especially for third-party organisations connecting to something, they're never going to have that line of sight. So it's better to proxy it anyway.
Yeah, so admittedly, this has taken a lot of time to develop, and it started way prior to COVID, when most of us were going to an office, so campus location, and the on-premise, I suppose the connectivity was lots of users connecting to those virtual machines were relatively local.
Sure.
We've all gone home, and it kind of ruins this use case, to be fair, although there's another version of this coming, we'll see that in a minute. But there's been lots of interest in it because it does, I suppose, solve that problem or improve the user experience, because you're now much closer, the latency is lower. Whether an individual user might notice it is arguable, but if you've got thousands of users, obviously that will make a difference. So I think if it hadn't been for COVID, this would have taken off a lot more than it actually has done.
It'd be interesting to understand geographically how many people benefit from it.
Yeah.
Because we certainly have seen 300 milliseconds, you can pretty much deal with anything.
Yeah.
And so in the UK, I really don't see it as being a big thing.
Yeah, so I suppose the benefit is slightly reducing those well-connected, Europe, for example, we've got lots of Azure regions, they're never very far away, and we're all very well connected. Yeah. There's lots of regions in the US, but it's obviously a larger geography. When you go to places like India, we've only got 2 regions in quite a big space in, the Asia regions. So it might be more relevant for those guys over there where the distances are increased, potentially. So let's have a look at what we are working on then, which is perhaps a little bit more interesting. So we're continuing to expand our metadata service. So we've got Japan and Australia on our roadmap. We've also spent a lot of time in improving sort of the core components, the reliability of the service, much of which you might actually never notice. And it's perhaps more for us in terms of how we manage these multiple databases and all of this kind of stuff. But obviously that will have an improvement if there is ever, an Azure outage. It does happen from time to time. So the next thing is Private Link. Now, Private Link is a completely separate Azure service, which does, as the name suggests, it privately connects you, and when I say you, I mean your VNet in Azure, to our public PaaS services. Okay. So the example here is if we roll back, prior to Private Link, we had this thing called service endpoints, and prior to that, we just had public PaaS service. So if you deployed a storage account, for example, the only way to connect to it was using some storage keys and going across the internet. Now, obviously, you manage the keys. If you shared it with people, then they have access, but we wouldn't recommend that. What customers were asking for is a private mechanism for connecting to those storage accounts. So you have a VNet and you connect it to a service endpoint on the storage account, and then you block internet access to that storage. So it's now private. The problem with that was that there were some organizations where the IT admin was creating storage accounts and then enabling a service endpoint and then doing the same thing on multiple storage accounts, and then they had this capability of copying corporate data out to other storage accounts that they wanted to put. What Private Link does is it removes that capability. So you have a VNet and it can connect to a storage account, and if you enable the firewall to switch off internet access, the only route to that storage account is the VNet that you've enabled for that. So the admin would have to go and create another set of this if they wanted to. So it doesn't completely actually prevent that capability, but what they can't do is connect that VNet to another storage account, for example. So we are going to support that service. Now, the difference here is that with a storage account, you go and create a storage account and it's yours, you manage it. The AVD service is a global PaaS service used by hundreds of thousands of customers. So we can't switch it off from the internet. So you don't have your own iteration of it. You don't have your own slice of it. But what we will enable is to enable you to connect privately from your VNet up to the Azure PaaS service. So there won't be, you can enable it so there's no internet access to these virtual machines. The other benefit is that you can also, if you have ExpressRoute that terminates a VNet, you can connect from on-premises across your VNet up to the PaaS service, the AVD PaaS service, and obviously back again. So now you don't have to have internet access in any shape or form to use the AVD service. So lots of customers who are very, very security conscious have been asking for that. The next one is scheduled agent updates. So you're probably aware that we push out updates to the agents that run on the session hosts when we want to, basically, and you have no control whatsoever over that. You can't prevent it, or you can, but you'll basically be disconnecting the session host from the internet. So lots of customers have said, can we control this? Which is a fair ask. So we have this capability. It's in, I'm not even sure it is in, yeah, it is in private preview, where you get to set 2 dates, I think it's a 2 time windows per month, or it might be per week, I can't remember now, where you will accept the updates. Now, the VMs have to be powered on. If they're off, then we will skip that and move to the next one. Currently, as it stands, if the VMs are off for both of those time windows, the next time they come up, we'll force it down. But we've had customers say that they still don't even want that. So there might be an option to say, if they're down for window 1 and window 2, and when they come up, we don't want you to push the agents down, you'll have to wait for the next iteration of window 1, basically. But basically, it puts the control back into your hands about when you update the agents on these VMs.
How would that work with auto scaling? Would it power them on to actually update them, or would they stay turned off?
Well, today it won't power them on to update them. It will just power them on based upon whatever schedule you've got. There might come a time when we update auto scaling to say there's another trigger, which is update. And you might say, these are the 2 windows I've got for scheduled agent update. I want auto scaling to power them on. But that's not on the roadmap at this point in time. There's a new feature in Azure Compute called Hibernate, which is this capability of hibernating virtual machines. So they will go into a sleep state, you won't be charged for them, and then the target is to power these VMs on or wake them up in roughly 20 seconds.
Is that bringing them up at the same state they were at prior?
Yes. Yeah. So we will obviously want to take advantage of that, particularly with Start VM on Connect. So users can hibernate them, come in the next day, connect, 20 seconds later.
Like a trader or a developer who kind of hibernates the machine on a Friday and then works it up on the Monday morning. It's the exact same state.
Yeah.
Not like that.
Yeah. We also, so this is not related to AVD, but also in Azure we have this capability, what do we call it, pre-provisioning service, which basically, rather than you coming along and using whatever tool to go and deploy a VM, which takes whatever, 5-6 minutes, whatever it might be, we will have VMs, vanilla VMs pre-provisioned, and we will basically, when you go and ask for one, we'll switch it from a Microsoft subscription into yours, and again, it should be in the sort of 20, 30 seconds before you're able to connect to it, and then do whatever you want with it. So auto-scaling is going to be enhanced. It will, like I mentioned earlier, will support resource utilization. It will support this Hibernate capability. Not quite sure exactly what that will look like, but it will do. And we also have a new feature in development, which is the ability to update host ports. So you every month you put patches down, or whatever it might be, using whatever tool, SCCM or MEM, or whatever it might be. So that's kind of a legacy method of doing it. What we would rather do is just black the VMs with a new image that you've updated once, and we basically switch those VMs from the old image to the new image. So that's coming on its own, but we will also integrate that with the auto-scaling service. So we will be able to say, when we auto-scale off, for example, at that same point, we will update the image so that when it does get powered on, it's now version 2 or 3, whatever it might be. There is a new version of Insights coming. So there's a version 2, it will just have enhanced capabilities and make the whole experience a lot easier. We have had, the service is, 2 years old, just over 2 years. And we have had some big customers start deploying at scale. And some of them have hit this limit of the number of app groups that you can deploy. That limit is actually relatively low. Most of us weren't aware of this until our biggest customers started complaining about it. And that limit was 200. Now, that can be increased to 400 with a support ticket. But we are also going to support this capability. Now, just to go back, the limitation here is that AVD basically needs to interrogate Azure AD to find every possible app group that you're not a member of to determine the ones that you are a member of. And that takes time. Azure has a throttling limit, so this is an API call for every single user and every single group that they might be in, so it creates a lot of API calls. What we're effectively going to be doing is caching that locally and making local calls to that, so we're avoiding that issue. I mentioned phase 1 of Azure AD. We are currently in private preview for phase 2, which is introducing a new protocol called RDS AAD Auth. Okay, what this brings predominantly is end-to-end single sign-on, and I've got a little video just to show what that looks like. So what we will basically be doing is taking your Azure AD credentials from your device, and then single signing you onto your Azure or your AVD VM, and then single signing you into any apps that are also using Azure AD for auth.
Oh, that's single sign on the Citrix example.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So yeah, the obvious app is obviously Office 365, but you might have Salesforce, Workday, whatever it might be. Any app that uses the same Azure AD, we will single sign you into that. In conjunction with that, we have a feature coming in MEM. So Azure AD and MEM support go together, because you need to be Azure AD joined. Now we join those VMs to Azure AD, we can take advantage of MEM. MEM will have, hopefully, it's meant to be some point in December, this auto-subscribe feature, which auto-subscribes the client for you. So the use case, and I'll show it in a minute with the video, is we take your Azure AD credentials, auto subscribe to clients. You click on an icon, directly single signed in. You then go and launch your app, single sign in as well. So true end-to-end single sign in. So I mentioned a new protocol. So the other thing, going back to RDP short path for managed networks is GA. We also have RDP short path for unmanaged networks, which is effectively the internet. So the one thing I didn't mention with RDP short path is not only do we use ExpressRoute, but we also switch over to UDP. So it's the combination of the quickest, in theory, the quickest network connection into the VNet where these VMs reside, and also a much more efficient protocol. What we're introducing with unmanaged, obviously we can't control the network between you and AVD, but we will introduce UDP through the control plane. So it will be a far more efficient mechanism, network protocol, to connect through to those virtual machines through our control plane. I think that's it, really.
I've got a question. So
Yes.
you skipped past it, I don't know if you don't have much information on it, but the quality of experience dashboards, what's going to be in that? Because that looks really interesting.
Yes, so I don't know exactly what's going to
Okay,
be in that,
fair enough.
but it's designed for IT admins to get a much better, broader, holistic view of what's going on in AVD to make their life easier.
Fantastic. Okay.
So is that an expansion of the workbook that's currently in AVD at the minute?
I'm not sure whether it's going to fit in exactly with that, or whether it'll be a slightly different part of the portal, to be honest, at this point. That it is very early in that, the life cycle of that.
One more thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've got a vested interest here. The Linux client.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's looking very good, by the way.
Yes.
I can't give much away, can I?
No. But there is a native first-party Linux client coming. Yes. Any other questions on any of that?
Just one from me.
Yeah.
So my manager is a bit more traditional, like says CCM, things like
Yeah.
that. He's always saying, why do we have to basically create the image from the computer, update it, add the software, redeploy to everything. So it says there, simplified master image management and automated hostable image updates. How much time roughly would it take off a month? If it was a month where you weren't adding software, could it be fully automated?
So the goal here is that is fully automated. So whatever the size of your estate is, you could say, well, I want all of them to be updated at this particular time. And now it will take however long it takes. So if you have got 100,000 VMs, it's not going to be quick. But it will fully automate the replacement of the disks basically underneath the virtual machine. So you would say, this is my new image in this disk. Go and replace the disk on all of these VMs. So you still have to manage the image in its own right, but then we will be making use of Azure basically to go and replace all of these disks on those virtual machines. So, you might want to kick it off on a Saturday morning, whatever, and however many VMs you've got, it will just sit there and, that's the idea, sit there and go through, replace all of the disks on these VMs.
Is that the estimates when it comes out? So
Sorry?
do you have any estimates when that's coming out?
Probably the second half of 2022.
Let's say you get updates to a single golden image, and then that image is then pushed out to all of the endpoints once you replace the disk.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Tom, just a quick on the Coxton. So effectively, if you've got redirections, so for Teams or for MSIX app attach, and then disks are flipped out, then obviously there might be a few niggles when the user logs in again. Effectively, for anything that's local, then profile services is going to basically be established in the sections. So that wouldn't be done under a control change rather than just done automatically.
Oh yeah, so we're not saying you wouldn't do this under proper change control by any means.
It sounds too easy without actually pointing that out.
Well, I suppose the technology, well, it's not easy, but that's the easy part. But I suppose the difficulty is getting change controls created and getting the time. But I suppose customers are currently doing this in some form internally with their existing images. on premises.
It's better just to rebuild them all in their completeness, right? And you've abstracted away the apps, you've abstracted away the profile, then just what's underneath becomes like a white good.
Yeah. So you can do that today. There's absolutely nothing stopping you going and deploying a whole host of new virtual machines, creating a new host pool, swapping the icon over, job done. So I think the next slide is just a little bit around this single sign-on. So this new protocol basically does exactly what I've said. It takes your AD credentials, signs you into the VM, enrolls the VM in Intune if this is the deployment time, single signs you into apps that are using Azure AD. The device is managed by Endpoint Manager. As Neil mentioned earlier, we have just released into public preview this capability of storing the profiles on Azure files, which has been enlightened to consume Azure AD as a Kerberos realm. So you don't need line of sight to that domain controller. What I think we mentioned it, or Neil mentioned it, is we do require hybrid user accounts. So those user accounts need to be sourced in Active Directory for this to work. And in roughly, or it should be H2 of next year, we will support cloud-only accounts. So you will then, at that point, not have any dependency on Active Directory in the AVD context. So if you were deploying brand new, there's no need to go and deploy any domain controllers, or at least have them available. You don't need line of sight for anything when cloud-only accounts come. The other thing that customers asked in this context is a thing called support for a thing called Azure AD B2B. Now, that's a product that perhaps you might not necessarily know about, but it's the ability to invite user accounts from other directories into yours and then present them services. We don't support that today, and it makes it difficult for organizations that are collaborating with others, because what you want to do is just give them an AVD session and put your apps on them and let them use it, but you have to manage the identities locally for that use case. So when B2B support comes, which will probably be early 2023, that will make that whole use case a lot easier. Anyway, what I was going on to...
Tom, can I speak on that? So,
yeah.
There's one thing I know you guys have been threatening for a long time. I still yet to see it. It's the ability to use the compliant device flag in Azure AD and trust that across to another Azure AD, and then be able to use that in a conditional access rule. Because we have a huge amount of third parties that we have. The devices belong to an Azure AD that's not ours, but they're compliant. Yeah. What I want to do is use that compliant device flag in our conditional access rule.
Yeah, okay.
And it was threatened about a year ago, and I'm still yet to see it, but that's a game changer in some regards.
So what I would say up front, AAD is not my product, so basically, and to be fair, I haven't even heard of that feature.
But you know what I mean?
But I know what you mean. Yeah. I think there might be some compliance
issues. It's like a trust relationship, for want of a better
word. It's not like a good thing. I mean, we have to trust devices that are built by a third party to join our network and do it to our standards. So if they can do the same thing with conditional access, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like a trust relationship between Azure and Azure AD.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't have the answer, to be honest, but...
Can you find out?
Yeah, all right. So this little video is just... well, the first part is just showing that this VM is registered to Azure AD. It can be registered, joined, whatever it is. So this just... In fact, this is slightly pointless, because your users probably wouldn't be doing this. This would be automated. Let me just try and speed it up a little bit, because it's a bit boring watching this little bit. But it's basically just demonstrating that this VM is synced with Azure AD. So we have your Azure AD credentials. So that's just proven that. We launched the AVD client, and what you'll see is, rather than you going and clicking subscribe, we are taking your primary Azure AD credentials and registering you with the service. So this is the standard process, but we just automated it for you. So users don't have to, one, know the URL, two, put their username and password in. We've actually got lots of customers who for whom the users do not know their passwords. Surprising how many customers are already at that point. So we go and launch a desktop, and as you would expect, it single signs you into that session. So no longer do we need the 2 prompts, no longer do we need any user prompts, it's fully single signed on. So restraint, as you would imagine. What it doesn't show is just launching Office or anything.
So that's going to get integrated with like some sort of MFA or something like that.
Well, MFA is a feature of Azure AD, and you're signing into Azure AD here. So MFA will.
My security engineer says somebody does something unattended, and then there's a resource. Then they click on it. Is there an MFA prompt after that at any point?
So one of the other features that we're working on is MFA at any time, basically. So currently the minimum is an hour, but if you will be able to set, reduced timeframes or other triggers for that MFA.
That comes back to my original point. The device might not be signed in with the Azure AD that you want to be signed in, but then you want to single sign it in with the next element. So you almost need incognito into that client.
It's not complicated.
Not at all.
Well, it's a reality. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
When's that feature available for the auto sign up?
So it's coming from 2 places. First is from MEM, where this feature is enabled. It's actually just a registry setting that MEM's applying. So that will come into MEM. It's scheduled for this month. Now, it might not happen for whatever reason, but that's when it's scheduled. The new protocol is currently still in some respects being developed. We've gone into private preview, so we've got some customers testing it out. Public preview should start in Q1 of next year, and it should GA in Q2, or thereabouts. Any other questions on any of that? No? All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. Are we...
Cool. So, hello everybody, and it's a real privilege to be late to the first ever physical AVD user group. So well done, Ryan, for being late due to the typical Leeds traffic on a Thursday. And by the way, Thursday, if you don't know, Leeds is party night, so it's a perfect time to have a user group, right? Anyway, so just to kind of give you a introduction, if you don't know who I am and if this random guy stood in front of you, my name is Ryan. So I've been in the industry over 15 years plus, can't really count anymore. Produced a few books and things and publications, and I'm known for my efforts and work in remote desktop services. And obviously, when Microsoft introduced Windows Virtual Desktop or RDMI and Azure Virtual Desktop, that's when I kind of moved on to there. Recently produced a book, Mastering Azure Virtual Desktop. That's out for pre-order now, so if you would be so kind to either attend you for purchasing, give me a good review, that'd be really appreciative. But if you did want to know something about Azure Virtual Desktop, there's a little bit of information in there which can help. And I've got some really strong critics from the industry, and one of them is behind you, who've spent a lot of time criticising and making sure the content is up to scratch. So yeah, that's the book. So applications, right? So we've had this physical tin problem for years where we've got to go to procurement, we've got to agree with executives that they've got to buy tin. We've got to buy cables, we've got to buy a data center, we've got to buy cooling, we've got to buy rack space. And that can take time. And it can take a considerable amount of time. Projects can be 3 years, can be 5 years, and some can be a 10-year project. It could be data centers. We're talking about banks. They could spend 20 years planning their future of an ecosystem for IT and technology services. But now with cloud has changed things just a little. Cloud has allowed you to scale quickly. And when it first was introduced, there's a lot of people I used to work with said, Azure, what's this rubbish? It's not going to happen. No one's moved to that. And lo and behold, 8-10 years later, people have. And the interesting thing was people started off with this terminology called cloud bursting. If anybody remembers that, that was the traditional, you got on-premises assets and you're going to, run complex calculations or whatever in the cloud, quickly in a short period of time. But now it's become more and more affordable in some people's eyes, and this model of perpetual is changing to subscription and consumption. But what about the applications? That is the question. We're still stuck with applications, and we're not stuck with applications which might have been produced 2 weeks ago. We're actually stuck with applications which date back years. And Some of these applications could be running on Windows 95 machines in car manufacturers. They could be running in banks. They could be running ATM machines. They can be anything and anywhere. Aircraft, military, you name it. Medical is another really good example where they have to keep data for 35 years. The interesting thing here, though, is Microsoft said in 2018 that there was 35 million application titles with over 175 million variations of application. That equates to over 5 trillion different applications in the world today. Possibly more because it was 2018. So, what do we do with applications? People leave, Bob retires, people move on. Knowledge inside the organization, disappears. And that's the fact, Bob is gone, what do we do? Some organizations rewrite software and develop new systems and name them as the person. But unfortunately, with some of these kind of old, complicated applications, the challenge is, how do we get it onto the modern platform? It's always been a problem, and it's going to continue to be a problem. So, bear that in mind. And then we've got application formats. Everybody knows MSI, Microsoft Installer. Everybody knows that. That's been around a while, and that's not going anywhere at the moment. But that's a common, format. You can put conditions in there, and you can configure it so that it can do X, Y, Z with install it. Registry, pre-configurations. You can even have an MSI with no application, it just to do outlay a configuration on your operating system. There's no requirement to have any such files in there, but it's useful. And then, no relation, by the way, Tim Mangan, lovely guy, I met him in Holland recently. Tim is an absolute guru when it comes to AppV. And obviously he's been a weathered veteran in the world of applications, Citrix and all the rest of it. And he talks about AppV. And to be fair, AppV is a good product, right? But it's end of life, it's deprecated. And there's a change in the weather. Things are moving to this new product called MSIX. So MSI with an X at the end of it, which is Microsoft's modern application platform. So what is the real difference between AppV and MSIX? Well, one is app virtualization, and one's app virtualization with a hint of containerization. So what does that mean? In theory, if you download an MSI today and you install it, there is a risk that it could, if not checked properly, and it could still have or harbor malware. 6% of the applications I tested not too long ago, 150 it was, 6% from reputable packaging sources contained over, 6% of the malware was actually pretty bad. It wasn't just, some kind of, web browser tracker. It was keyloggers. It was ransomware type technologies in these installers, and that's quite worrying. So by putting it into an MSIX, which is a container, so you're virtualizing the app, and then you're also containerizing it, it can read the global operating system and it can read the registry. But it can't write outside the container. Why am I telling you this? Do you really care? Probably not. But there's an important point to remember here. Because it's inside a container and it can only read write inside the container and read outside the container, it's more secure. It can't, do anything outside the container. So if you wanted a use case for going and moving your application to the modern platform, I'm just giving you one, security. You want to protect your operating system, you want to protect your users, you are dealing with high-profile sensitive clients or whatever, the pizza's arrived and it's not a small amount. You should consider MSIX. But then there's the other. And that is the third party. And that's container, streaming, and other. So third-party technologies do exist today where you can deliver your applications in a non-Microsoft format on a Windows operating system. However, something called vendor lock-in. Everybody heard of that phrase before? Challenges we have today in the modern world of people who want to deliver applications to other platforms, you need to kind of shave off costs. People want you to reduce the costs. And the only way to do that really is to use the native technology which is given to you. And that's why the likes of Azure Virtual Desktops become quite popular in the industry today. And then when you get so big, you add a hint of nerdio, which adds the value of reducing and saving costs. There's all of these values. But just remember, these are the application formats to call out today. I'm not saying that third-party product's bad, but from my experience and what people are saying today is that they're trying to reduce costs, and wherever possible, they want it to be native. Also, by using native, you can also standardize the future migration to this end. And that was what I was talking about, project time and costs. And the one final point on that was the The applications are usually now take the longer to move, 3 to 5 years. The deployment of an AVD environment can be done over a couple of ARM templates in a couple of days. The actual substance of the business, the applications, will take longer. Okay, so there's one more thing I want to cover today, and a lot of organisations have been doing that with the VMware, the Citrix and that in the past, and the Hyper-V element. When people were on Windows 7 and they had XP apps and stuff, they said, right, what you need to do to get to Windows 7, you need to use type 2 hypervisors and virtualize all your apps and then run them XP apps in a hypervisor in an operating system on Windows 7. Okay, so we did that. So I've got a disk, I've got RAM, I've got CPU, but then I've got virtualization on top of that, so nested virtualization where I'm running disk, RAM, and CPU. And that resource is being consumed. Why would we want to do that? Why would we want to cost ourselves money? And obviously, just on this one here, I don't know if this works. I'm just going to try. It does. It does. I don't actually tell you. Just got to use them properly. It's like trying to drive the car, I don't know what button to push. They said to me, we need to patch your gearbox. I said, beg your pardon. Don't work. What am I doing? Anyway.
Just use your finger.
Yeah, that thing over there with the colourful things. The problem you've got when you're using Type 2 hypervisors is, we're using QEMU emulation or what you want, like the Android tablets where people do development, is there's a cost associated. So you can only use specific Azure virtual machines, and obviously that's a higher cost. So just bear in mind, if you can get your applications natively, deliver them by Azure, the app file containers by FSLogix, and deliver them as MSIX app attach or MSIX natively, you're on for a winner because you can technically port these applications into the future as the operating system change. And from the previous session, it just goes to show in the space of 6 months, 8 months, how Microsoft have just changed the game again. And obviously the future of apps, we've kind of covered it slightly. The future is MSIX. AppV is on its way out. No doubtedly that MSI will probably be on its way out in the future. You can still use file-based applications, but there's nothing saying that you can't get them into an MSIX container. So, speed up because everyone wants food. So what you can see here, there we go, it's kind of working, this is all the different versions of the operating systems over the years. This fundamental change here was Windows Vista. So Windows Vista, they changed document settings to nostalgia kicking in for some, changed the document settings to users and program data. And believe it or not, a lot of the application issues you see today are challenged by that because they don't know where to go. They're looking for the older, registry hides, they're looking for all of that kind of stuff. So that was one of the major changes. But if I told you today that you can port most of your applications, legacy applications that is, the modern packaging container, you'll be like, really? And the answer is yes. And there's examples which I can show you where you can play Paratrooper from 1982, which is 16-bit in an MSIX container, Fox Pro, which is 16-bit in an MSIX container. They all can be done today. So just to kind of cover what MSIX is effectively a zip file with a manifest file, which is XML, and that controls how the application behaves in the environment. It was actually founded in 2018. Anybody got an Xbox? Anybody? Yeah, they run on MSIX, so all the apps that are delivered today are streamed by an MSIX package. So as you can see in the background, Microsoft is standardizing the delivery of their applications to the platform with this technology. So it's great that Xbox works, but it'd be great if all the other apps work as well. 16-bit and 32-bit support, and also you can use certificates which are self-assigned. I'll cover in more detail in a minute, domain-based or public, depending on your organization, depends on what you want to do. What does it look like? So the payload, where the application files are, which is the virtual file system, or the file system, the data repository, whatever you want to call it, the VFS. We then got the manifest, which I call it the brain, which effectively is where you configure extensions and how the application behaves. PSF fix-ups and things like that, you put the launches in there so that you call them correctly. Package block map file is where it's all indexed, so obviously speed and obviously downloading and transferring across the network. If you've signed the package, you'll have an app signature package in there, and then there's a code integrity check as well, which you can set and don't have to set. When you unzip it using 7-zip, that's what it can look like. There's a few things like user and registry data in there, and as you can see, I've got Notepad, mremote ng, and putting on there as packaged. How am I doing for time? Good? Cool. Package support framework. Anybody heard this before? Who's not heard of it? Oh, you're in for a boring treat. So, effectively, a package support framework is what we call a shim in the application world. A shim is like a launch, what launches before the application. So when you launch a shim, it calls the application and does a lot of things behind that. And what this is, the package support framework, is because there is some complications with writing inside a container and writing outside of a container, you've got to do fix-ups, as Tim Mangan calls them, through this. Or you can write your own if you're that clever. You can do your own fix-ups and then push it through the manifest. How this really works is there's an PSF launcher there with a config file, JSON. The JSON has a lot of instructions in it, and it launches that. My only bugbear with this, apart from being a shim, is that when you click it and you've got a large application, let's say it's 8 gig, you're there with your plot going, what's going on? You see in the tray that the PSF launcher is working, and it's running loads of tasks in the background, but you can't see that. You're like, where's my app? So for a user, when he's got a massive app and he's waiting for it to launch, he could be waiting 5-10 minutes for this to kind of kick in, and then he gets his app. So the only thing I would say, which no one's actually written or put in yet, not even Tim, it'd be great to notify the user the application's being launched, right? So that's the problem with shims. When you see a shim, you don't actually see any communication from the app, and the user sat there going, what's going on? And that's a bad user experience. What looks inside, so left-hand side is the config file, right-hand side is what you'd see when you've had the PSF in there. I've just done some examples using launching a reader file, just so you can see it, and in the bottom you can see some redirection fix-ups as well. But yeah, it's a bit complicated, but long story short is that's today. Microsoft's aim is not to do this in the future, so they are working towards this, and hopefully, Andrew and John Binsell and everybody in that team, the platform team, will obviously do this, and they're working very hard to kind of make all these improvements, and that is what we have to do today. Hopefully tomorrow we don't. There was also something about context menus. With an MSIX, the context menu doesn't work. In the latest release, Microsoft have fixed that. PSFs, I mentioned about the delay, that's visible. This is a really small app, which was probably, about 30, 40 meg. As you can see here, I've got the SIM, the VHDX, which is app attached, and at the bottom you'll see MSIX with PSF. If you look at MSIX and you look at PSF, you can see, notably, there's a longer delay. So when you're using Package Support Framework, if you can, wherever possible, avoid using it because it impacts the launch of the application. We're getting there. I know it's a bit boring for a Thursday, but we're nearly there. So when you're packaging apps, some people say you've got to do one-to-one, and this is to demonstrate you don't. You can have one application in a package, in a container, or you can have multiple. So if you want to install Notepad, Putty, and other apps in that same container, you can do that, and there's nothing stopping you doing that anywhere today, and that's just kind of a little illustration of depiction of how that works. Okay, so we're going to talk about creating an MSIX. But before we do that, when you're creating this and doing messing around, you need a certificate. Neil, recently in some feedback in his editorial review, said, I still don't know the best way to create a self-signed certificate. Take a picture. So,
the thing is, self-signed certificate.
No, domain for enterprise domain, yeah. And I won't even use public either. I would always use domain. Well, yeah, you could do. Yeah, if you want, or you can just use PowerShell. Or you could just use that Bentix and all the other vendors I don't want to name today, which integrate. Anyway, so we're going to go into this in a minute in the video, but just so you can see it, what you can do is you can actually configure the certificate settings, like so every time you create a package in the Microsoft Packaging tool, which that is a screenshot of, you can set the certificate and the password, but also to note, you should always timestamp it. So Stefan Giorgio has also been caught out, so have I. But when your certificate runs out, your app stops working, and obviously if it's not being timestamped, you're pretty much game over. So you can use with self-assigned and public and domain, you can timestamp. So if you can, that's sectago.com. You should really timestamp your certificates where possible. Okay, here's a video. I'm now going to, with my mind and telekinesis, try and control this. And does it work? Maybe not. Is it? Oh, there you go, I take it back. So I'm going to launch the packaging tool here, and then before I go into actually doing a capture, or an install capture, I'm going to go and set them settings I just described for the certificate. So I'm going to set a certificate, I'm going to set the password, and then I'm going to put the timestamp in there. You can see it there, you can do things like for the Microsoft Store, code integrity as well. There's a few different customizations. And down the side, you can do things like registry inclusion, exclusion, and so on and so forth as well. So there's a bit you can customize. You don't have to just click the big button when you open up the app. There's some things you can customize to make your life easier. I'm talking quite fast because I know people are hungry. Anyway, so that's just showing you some things you can add and remove in there and tweak if you need to. But obviously we're not going to do that today. We're just going to kind of go on to do a package. So I'm going to click application package here. Also, James Rankin has produced a video if you want to watch that on YouTube. I'm sure he'll share it with you later, just to call you out. Wait for that to finish. Checking that the driver's installed. So optional features, there's the Microsoft Packaging Tool driver. What sits in there, you need to make sure that's installed. This tool checks that it's there. Once you're done, disable anything you want to disable and go ahead and select the application you wish to run the install capture. And this, we're using the really complex application Notepad++, highly complicated, which everybody doesn't package, by the way. No one else has done this. And the reason why they don't do it is because it's so quick, right? Fill in the details. Anything with an asterisk, you need to make sure you've applied, otherwise it won't allow you to progress to the next step. I'm just putting out testing on this occasion. And then we're going to go ahead now and do the install. So you run the install like you would normally. So if you're familiar with application capture, install capture in other products, you install the application, you launch the application, and then you choose the registry settings and things within the application you want to set. You can do that manually, but it's sometimes better to do like what I'm doing here. And that effectively will be captured during that snapshot process is effectively what it's doing. So everything you're doing has been recorded. And once we're finished with that, we'll then complete the package when it's finished showing you all the bits. Come on, dawdling. Not fast today, clearly. Okay, cool. So we're finished with that. We're now going to continue and complete the package. You'll see that the executable which we require, the entry point as we call it, is notepad++.exe. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to continue. So if you've got services, they actually run outside the container, they don't run inside, but you can send all that in there. But we're not going to do that today. The other thing is the button called the package editor. A lot of people show you how to run the basic capture, but they never actually show you about the package editor. So this is where you can actually add the PSF fix-up files. So if you want to add them in there, you can do that. Import the files and stuff like that. Registry as well. You can inject custom configurations. You can take them out the MSI, push them in there so that they apply inside that container. So there's lots you can do it there, nice and simple. But obviously if we get to, well, when we get to it, as you can see, you can export as well. So if you wanted to kind of change things and modify them and re-import, you can do that. This is where you can add a file, remove a file, add a folder, and so on and so forth. So there's a bit of flexibility before you create the final package, you can manipulate the file system and the registry however you like it, essentially. And now we're going to proceed with creating the package, which we've done. And then what we've got is that package, and we launch that, and you can install and run that. However, that's enough for today on that. We're not going to talk about attach. So, reliability, Microsoft offer, because it's inside a container, they offer a 99.9% reliability of successful uninstall. Anybody familiar with the term WinRot will appreciate that over a period of time, the operating system gets very, very messy. And obviously, by using this technology, it does kind of remove that pain point. However, if you're using PSF fix-ups and PowerShell scripts and you're writing outside of that container, that's not guaranteed, that's on you. So just remember, if you are trying to make an application work and it's writing outside the container, that is on you. Bandwidth, obviously I mentioned the block map already, and then disk optimization, it does offer a level of deduplication. Success rates. You know, I said there's like over 5 billion applications in the world. Someone please give me a report of all these applications, because no one has. So how does anybody know the success rate? Anybody? No one knows. I've had Microsoft say to me, oh, this customer, they've had 300 applications, they all work great. And then I've had someone else say to me, none of them work. Tim Mangan is right about application fidelity, though, where he says, you know, some lose functionality and features, but some businesses might deem that as acceptable, right? So we don't know until we go through that UAT process. But, you know, success rates are still to be determined. And I think that's a fair comment to make, would we say? Certificates, everybody. I'm going to get t-shirts. It was the certificate. and pound them out to everybody. Make sure you install the certificate in the trusted people store. Someone said to me the other day, well, which one is it, computer or local user, which one, or current user even? And I said, well, that's your design decision. If you want to distribute that certificate every single time, that's a design decision for you to do. If you want to do it blanket out to everybody, then fine, do it that way. It's not really a decision for me to make. I would have run this and showed you Paratrooper, but I just thought I'd tease you. If you do want a copy of Paratrooper outside of this session, just drop me a line and I'll send you it. And all you'll hear is that beep, beep, beep all night while every family's trying to sleep, Yeah, that's how you irritate people, right? Because my wife said, what is that awful noise? And I'm like, I'm playing Paratrooper. Shouldn't you be working? I said, this is work. It's right. Get out of it. Anyway, moving on. So, Intune, Endpoint Manager. Interestingly, you can deliver your certificates quite using the CAR file fairly simply by basically copying the base 64 encoded file and pasting that in there. And that's just a very simple instruction there just to kind of do that. But under the Windows 10 configuration profile, that's very easy to do. And that's how you distribute your certificate to all of your users using Intune. And obviously to install your MSIX, you'd use a line of business app to install it within Intune as well, which is incredibly easy to do. You can automate some of this in PowerShell and pull through a file share and stuff like that. But the main thing to remember is don't be installing MSIXs until you've done the certificate piece, which is there. And to be fair, it's fairly simple to do. And if you want any more information on that, I think Microsoft's repo has a simple way of doing it, but effectively you're just doing a custom setting. And that, because everybody's hungry, is a speedy Ryan Mangan session on creating an MSIX package and also delivering it to workspaces. If you want to know more about MSIX and MSIX App Attach, you can go and get the book online. And if you want to know more about Azure Virtual Desktop or reconfirm your thoughts on certain things, you can also get that there. Questions? Yes.
Are there any particular types of apps that you should avoid?
Good question, well presented. So some people say, like, we've got these Oracle apps, and Oracle apps are not Oracle apps, are they? They're like an Oracle form app, and then with forms behind it. And they can be challenging, and you can package the tool to do that, but then you've got to do all of the bits there. Drivers are a no-go. Microsoft recommend drivers go on the operating system. That's what they say.
That would also be a problem for Type 2 hypervisor-based solutions.
You got it. Yeah.
So my question is really, where would you use a Type 2 hypervisor-based solution?
Me personally, probably never. Wherever possible, I wouldn't do it because it depends. It depends on the business requirement. Yeah. So I went into an organisation recently, and we did some work where they have these kilns that heat up to like 2,000 degrees C, and they make things like moulds and you name it. They did all sorts. So the hardware was supported on 16-bit by the manufacturer. The software was supported by the manufacturer, but the application won't run on Windows. Say what? So we had support, and then no support by the actual main supercomputer, as it were, which is a bit challenging. So we didn't use Type 2 hypervisor. No. We used the available emulation capabilities out there in the market today to handle the 16-bit DLLs. And that can be done today, and you can run that in containers. So there's no real need. And if you didn't already know, with Windows 10, it comes with NTVDM, which is a 16-bit emulation. So until Windows 10 goes bang, technically you can still, even though it's not really what people want you to do, you can still run up to the end of life cycle of Windows 10 your 16-bit applications.
Okay, build this on Windows 11.
No. I don't think they do 32-bit Windows 11, do they? They pulled that plug. The same with, I tried to get around IE11, and I must have spent a whole week trying to kind of hijack it, and they're like, nah, you'll never win. And it's right, because they're completely...
It's still Windows 10 as well.
Yeah, so Windows 10 will go bang at the moment, at some point, but if you were to deliver today, you could still use Windows 10's 32-bit. I think the question of Type 2 hypervisors is more about, the last chance saloon, last resort. If everything's gone wrong and you need to get it working, you could use VMware, which VMware support today, VMware Player, or the Quemo and all the others out there. But I would try and get it to native, because remember, it's not about backwards compatible, it's about forwards compatible for the future. And if it's a car manufacturer with £150 million worth of software, which you need to continue because it costs too much to redevelop, yeah,
And you're saying there's a good likelihood that'll work with MSIX.
Well, I can't guarantee because of the number of applications out there.
Yeah.
But
I want to guarantee.
I've got examples. No, you're not having one. I've got examples of doing it. And like I said, Fox Pro's a good one. Any more questions? Pizza. Brilliant. Thanks very much for letting me do the session. Okay, guys.
Guys, we've got pizza. We've been out with you 7:30. So,
Hey guys, thanks for allowing me to talk at this session. Big thank you to Neil and Shabazz as well for inviting me. My name's Anthony Mashford. I've been working within the IT industry for a few years now. I currently work as a cloud solution architect at NetApp, working in the Azure Business Group, focused on Azure NetApp files, and now the CVO product. However, it's not my first career. My first career, believe it or not, was a fisherman, and I enjoyed that in the summer, and then in the winter, less so. I was tired of getting cold and wet and basically miserable, getting up early in the morning. So I decided to change careers. And then I joined Her Majesty's Royal Marines, and I spent 10 years as part of Her Majesty's Royal Marines, which I soon figured out was a bad idea, because I was still getting up early in the morning, running around in the cold and wet. So actually now, sorry, that is me there in that picture. My career is technology. I've been here for over 20 years. I've done various roles with various companies, and of late, I've recently joined NetApp. I've been with the team now 6 months, and it's great. I'm enjoying it. It's a really great company to work with. Also, somebody follows me on Twitter. You might know I'm a bit of a petrol head. I love my motorcycles, and most times you'll find me hooning around a racetrack somewhere. Motorcycles are my passion, and mine's been really on 2 wheels. So, Azure NetApp files, I'm guessing some people here might be familiar with it, but also it does seem to be one of the best kept secrets in Azure. Are people familiar with Azure NetApp files? Used it before, seen it before? So It's very expensive. Is it expensive though? I mean, come on. You know, we'll discuss that. It's really important to point out though, it's a Microsoft first-party product. Personally, I think it's really badly named because as soon as you say NetApp somebody, they say it's expensive. So, yes, pros and cons, etc., but use cases, and we can discuss that. It is a Microsoft first-party product. You do not need to buy any additional licensing, any tin or anything. You consume it as part of your Azure consumption plan. The actual service itself, at the minute, is structured across 3 tiers: standard, premium, and ultra. And this is where you get your throughput, your performance. So the standard tier, you can achieve 16 megabytes per second of throughput per terabyte. That's essentially how it's laid out. The premium tier is 64 megabytes, right up to the ultra tier, where you can get 128 megabytes of throughput per terabyte. It's an extremely flexible service. It does have the widest choice of protocols in NFS and SMB SIF shares. However, now the Azure Files Premium product, I think as of last month, now supports NFS version 4.1. It is basically an advanced enterprise data management platform, so it's high-performance file shares on demand. The way it's structured within Azure, so underneath your Azure subscription, you have your NetApp Files accounts. You can have up to 10 accounts per subscription. Underneath your Azure NetApp Files accounts, you create capacity pools, and a capacity pool can host up to 500 terabytes. And then within your capacity pools, you place your volumes. As we said, the volume sizing, performance sizing is based on a per terabyte basis. However, that has recently changed. But essentially, within a single ANF account, you can create now up to 12.5 petabytes of storage. For the performance size, very simple calculation here. You can see service level times the volume quota, i.e. the size of the volume, will give you performance. The example here, we have 50 times, so 50 terabyte volume, times 64 will get 3.2 gigabytes a second of throughput. It's extremely performance, and it is ONTAP technology underneath its delivering this. This is NetApp's technology, which Microsoft have brought into the Azure ecosystem and are serving it on demand. So performance sizing, originally when ANF was released, performance sizing was auto QoS. So if you needed more throughput, you needed a bigger volume, etc. As you can see here, the data volume is 4 terabytes. The capacity pool is 10 terabytes, and the ultra tier will get 1,280 megabytes per second of throughput. So a 4 terabyte volume will give you 512 megabytes per second. However, over the life cycle of ANF, and ANF has actually been available, it went live in May 2019, so it's 2.5 years this service has been mature. Manual QoS was introduced, so the ability to leverage the throughput capability of the capacity pool, but individually assign that to a volume.
So in this example, with the data volume is 4 terabytes, because it's manual QoS, we can assign 704 megabytes per second of throughput to that volume. The backup volume, where you probably don't need, or you definitely probably don't need the actual throughput capability, you can assign a lower performance to. One of the benefits that ANF has over other Azure storage services is the ability to do dynamic volume shaping. So as you see, the green line at the top, that's the provision capacity, whilst the workload, the blue line, fluctuates throughout the day. And I suppose in an AVD sense, this would be a login storm, maybe in the morning, I don't know, 8 till 10 a.m. maybe, users coming in, never is logging in, so you need that performance. However, with the dynamic volume shaping, you can flex those volume sizes, you can flex the capacity to meet the throughput. In this then, introduce the natural byproduct of performance optimization in a public cloud as cost optimization. So the ability to flex these volumes up and down to meet demand can help you save some money. The difference with Azure Files, however, with an Azure Files premium solution, you can grow those volumes to get the higher throughput. However, there is a cooling off period of 24 hours. So you have to wait 24 hours until you can shrink those volumes back down again. This was actually a screen capture from the other day. And it actually bursts are permitted, but again, they're chargeable. With ANF, it's a consistent charge. You pay for what you use, there's no hidden charges. And if anybody's deployed Azure Files, for instance, at the hot or cool tier, transactions can be a pain. Has anybody experienced that with Azure Storage? Calculating transactions? If somebody can show me how to calculate these transactions, please do, because it's a little bit of a dark art. Authentication as well. So ANF, I think the brilliance of ANF is its simplicity. It's a very simple service to work with. The difference is with Azure Files Premium, you kind of need to be a little bit of a PowerShell guru, have a lot of patience, a bit of knowledge. I think the real key difference is within the actual Azure Blade, Microsoft actually created a video and put a video there to show you how to configure Azure Files Premium. But the difference with ANF is a simple case of you go to your Active Directory connections, you put in your details, your DNS server, domain, username, passwords, everything else, that's it. And providing the ANF volume, VNet where it resides, have line of sight connectivity to your domain controllers and can access DNS, etc. That's not a problem. The use cases with Azure NetApp Files, obviously today we're here to talk about AVD, yeah, but it does have many other use cases. The biggest one for the team that I work in at the minute is SAP. SAP is massive, absolutely huge. The actual requirements of the SAP HANA databases and the applications binaries to actually perform is immense. ANF can deliver that. It can deliver those items. One of the interesting ones on the right-hand side of the slide there, you'll see it's Azure VMware Solution. So Azure VMware Solution at the minute, ANF is certified as guest OS mount. The engineering team are actively now getting this certified for NFS data store mounts. So for us going forward, that will be really cool. So AVD and ANF. So why does storage matter? For the people who work in application delivery, you probably have this user, everything's slow, nothing's working, it's, oh my God, login times, etc. The slow login times, so storage contentions can manifest and that can slow down the login periods. Offline caches, all these sorts of things, the ability to stream. ANF can deliver these IOPS, and they can deliver these IOPS because it's underpinned using NetApp's ONTAP technology, which is the waffle operating system. And the actual hardware that's performing here is all flash arrays, which you get access to on demand. As I said, you don't need to buy any licensing, you don't need to configure any TIN, nothing else. You simply put your credit card in and you consume it when you need it. So a high-level architectural overview of ANF itself with AVD. As you can see here, the lower part of the slide, we've got the ANF volumes, which is for the shares. That's then connected in through the host pools. It's quite simplistic. Can I just have a show of hands? Is anybody actually using ANF with AVD currently? You are. And how are you finding it?
Well, the biggest problem I have is that with Azure Files is the file handle limit.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, it's nearly from there. So for me to kind of achieve like large number of transactions and connections at one time, I've got to use that. I've got no choice.
Yeah, that's funny because quite a few customers are now coming up against that, those file handle situations. And regarding the price point as well, to your point, I mean the actual cost. I think it is expensive, but when we've done TCOs and cost comparisons, so for example, to get the performance, one of our customers I'm working with at the minute, they've got only 12 terabytes they need to store. But to get the performance, they need a bigger machine because they need a bigger disk. To get the performance, they need the 32 terabyte disks. So actually, whilst it seems expensive on the face of it, the ability for this service to be dynamic and flexible actually makes it relatively cost effective. Whereas if you're deploying in, one of the best ones I worked on was a customer, to Ryan's point, where an application written in 1995, I think, which is the lifeblood of that business. The only way they could deploy it, they actually moved to Azure before ANF became available, and they were putting in scale-out file servers, which weren't delivering the performance. To get the performance, they needed to put in bigger machines. That wasn't delivering. They needed to put bigger disks, and the cost was just ramping up and up and up. ANF was released in May 2019. I was engaged with the customer. We architected and moved them in January 2020 onto ANF. Straight away, they realised cost savings. But the most important thing for their customers who are accessing the solution was the instant performance increase they saw. After a year of using the service, they saved over £250,000 just by moving on to ANF. And all of a sudden, all those customer complaints, the system's slow, it's not responsive, it all went away. So it's not a silver bullet, it's not a fix-all. It does have pros and cons, but I think generally the service itself does perform really well.
But that's in terms of, we're just talking things like file shares and profile shares, or are we talking about things in application-based shares? Because I think it kind of depends a bit on what you're actually trying to do. Firstly, what you're talking the storages.
Yeah, so application shares is a good use case, especially when you're talking about SAP. So SAP application binaries. Very large retailer in the UK, which people were working with. They originally had NFS clusters deployed, and these NFS clusters fell over on a regular basis. SAP being a very highly strung application, the response times sub-millisecond, the application will fall over. So by moving those binaries onto the ANF platform, which is a highly available platform, all of a sudden all that went away. They got the performance increase, but also the main thing for them, they got the reliability.
Do you get any kind of like sort of life cycle management and stuff like that as well? For instance, if you're hosting profiles, like FSLogic profiles on an ANF share, do you then get copies of it made and things like that, and sort of snapshots of the capability?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So basically ANF has the ability to snapshot, and it's on-tap technology underneath doing those snapshots. So you can create snapshots. Originally, snapshots were manual, then some clever people wrote some logic applications, but now snapshot policy is built-in component of the ANF service within the blade. So you can go into the blade, create snapshot policies, your daily, weekly, whatever you need, and post that. What was the other thing you said? There was something else you said just before that. Lifecycle management. Yeah, so another thing is as well, it's the dynamic service level change. So I'll skip forward and try and find that. So there's a dynamic service level change. So this is a cooling off period. If you do this with the Azure Files platform, there's that cooling off period. You can do dynamic service level change now within ANF. So for instance, if you're at standard tier and you needed more performance, you can move those volumes into a capacity pool at a higher tier, ultra or premium. But there is a cooling off period there of 7 days. So once you do move, there's a cooling off period for 7 days before you're allowed to move back. For lifecycle management for data, there's a new feature coming, which I can't talk about because I'm not allowed to, but there is a new feature coming which essentially will give you that lifecycle management where you will be able to apply a policy, for instance, data of a certain age, tier it. So it's cool, watch it. Enabling continuous availability. So continuous availability is a feature of ONTAP, and that's recently been introduced into the ANF service as well. So this is to safeguard against Microsoft doing some updates on the platform. So if there's something happening on the back end of the platform with continuous availability, so for SMB shares, you won't see any service outage. It will seamlessly fail across. That's a new thing, and it's a simple tick box. So when you actually create your SMB volume, you just tick that box, and that will enable continuous availability across that volume. So cross-region replication. This is an interesting one. It's been a feature which was in preview for I think about a year. It went GA last month to a massive round of applause. So cross-region replication gives you the ability to create a replica of a volume in a partner region. So for instance, we're in the UK South, UK West. You have your volumes in UK South, you can create a replica of that volume of read-only copies. It's an asynchronous replica into the partner region, in this case UK West. For us, some regions, in fact UK South actually now, you can create a volume if you wanted to out of country into the German region. And likewise within the US, some of the regions have multiple partners, not directly paired partners, if you see what I mean. So most regions are directly paired, but with some of the regions now you can actually create a copy outside of that. And it's a seamless failover. So the actual time to failover it's a manual process. This isn't automated. It is a bit of a bone of contention with certain clients. But if it was me personally looking after a system like this, I wouldn't want an automated failover. I would want to be in control of the failover. But yeah, you can fail that volume across. Essentially, you break them here. That makes it then a writable copy in the partner region. And obviously, with your DR plans and everything else, if you are your VMs, probably using Azure Site Recovery, to move those machines across.
What defines that partner combination, Lisa? Can you do that yourself? Or?
Yeah. So if you create a volume within the primary region, and then you create a volume in the secondary region, and you sync them together. I have actually got a load of Terraform. If anybody uses Terraform, I've actually written some Terraform code to create a whole demo lab examples of this. So it's on my GitHub repos, a bit of a train wreck at the minute. I've ripped a load of it down, but I have uploaded some of those that Terraform code at the minute. And if you wanted to use it, it will build a complete lab for you to test it.
I was wondering how far apart those partners can be from a millisecond latency perspective, if you see what I mean.
Well, this all replicates on the Azure backbone.
Right.
So there's no sort of latency of it. Well, I can't remember, Tom might be able to advise better what the backbone is, but I think it's pretty substantial.
It was the last time I asked it, something like 96 terabytes. Something just like that.
Yeah.
Big number, anyway.
Yeah. So, and the important thing about that, obviously, there's the replication charges are very minimal. And it's replicated as part of the service itself. It's not going over the wire, so you've got no VNet, egress charges, nothing like that. But if, I suppose, physics gets in the way here as well, bend space and time to make this work. But, yeah. The replication intervals you can set for cross-regional replication at the minute are 10 minutes, 1 hour, 1 day. Again, some customers do take issue with this. I know the product team are actively looking to lower that 10-minute level, but I think that's on the roadmap, and it's probably not going to be coming until maybe this time next year. So storage comparisons, the actual storage services themselves, where ANF has a competitor. So ANF is enterprise file storage. Azure NetApp files availability is 99.99. One thing I will point out, just to make you aware, it's not a zonal aware service. So it's not spread across zones. Whilst we do have stamps in multiple zones where zones are available, it's not a zonal aware service. Again, some customers do take issue with that. There are ways to deploy the service. For instance, if it's a latency issue, there's a new feature which is just been announced and it's gone into public preview, which is AVG, which is application volume groups. It's primarily for SAP workloads. However, I know the product team are actively looking to get it certified for Oracle. I would imagine more will come. We are using that process before the AVG, the application volume group feature, which is just a workflow in the Azure Blade. So to pin the volumes closer to the virtual machines, and that's combined with proximity placement groups. So you create your proximity placement groups with your virtual machines. Once those are created with AVG, you then pin the volumes to the proximity placement groups. But I know they're actively working to bring that to other services. We have implemented the method before this, which was called volume pinning. So volume pinning was a way the services were all created, and then we engaged with the SREs in the back end to actually manually pin volumes within the system. And we have actually done that for a very large. We're doing it actually now for a very large AVD customer who's pushing 60,000 users onto Azure Virtual Desktop. But that's a manual process. And the reason we're doing that is because I think it was around about September last year, the Azure system within the UK had a bit of a moment and ANF went offline, as did a few other services. But the problem is then that took the whole of this customer's platform out. The reason we're doing the manual pinning for them is purely to limit the blast radius. So they can put a set percentage of users within different zones. And quite recently, one of the main differences between Azure NetApp files and Azure Premium files was NFS protocol. But a couple of weeks ago, the NFS protocol now is supported with Azure Files Premium as well. The actual performance comparison. This is the interesting one, I think, because with our service, you get what you pay for. There's no hidden costs. And we can scale up to 450,000 IOPS as required. And we have got customers who are pushing those limits massively. And those customers are the big databases, the Oracle, DB2, and SAP clients. But we have the capacity to do it. And it's quite interesting. It depends how you look at this. Also depends on block size. So different applications, SQL, 64K block size. Obviously, you're not going to get that. Ours is the 4K block size. This is based on 4K block size. But yeah, it will scale. With other services, you get the IOPS, but you have to burst, and then you get charged for burst. And again, some of these charges are a little bit unquantifiable. I've been involved I've worked in Azure since 2012, so you're probably aware that's a relatively long lifestyle of the platform. I think there were 23 services when I started. God, I think I'm over 200 now. But all the way through that time, trying to price Azure has never been an exact science. So the great thing about ANF is you do pay for what you get. There aren't any hidden costs. Has anybody experienced those costs? Anybody come across that? No? One example I can give is with a local authority. They opted Azure Files over ANF, and they didn't just go for premium, they went for the hot tier. And they were estimated to spend around about £1,000 per month for storage. They spent £6,000 in transaction fees. And at the end of the month, we're going, what? Well, I told you, if they went with ANF, it would cost them £4,000. Some example to be aware of. And yeah, there's a cost. Obviously, it is what it is at the minute, the price per terabyte. So the actual ANF journey, I wanted to show this because the service itself has been it's been around since 2019, and it is a Microsoft service. It's the Microsoft team that are working behind this. They're working with. We have our engineers embedded. I'm part of the Azure Business Group, so I'm embedded within Microsoft. I work closely with the CSAs and some of the engineers. But back in May 2019, service was released, and it was okay. It wasn't great, it was okay. But the great thing, and it's what Microsoft do really, really well, is they listen and they work and they improve things. And this service has massively improved. I think one of the biggest improvements, definitely cross-region replication going GA, and interestingly as well, back in September, the ANF backup policy went into preview. So within the actual ANF service itself, you can back up. That was a big challenge for customers, was how to back up ANF. You've got to take into account other enterprise products, also it's in Azure, etc. But now you can use ANF backup policy in conjunction with a snapshot policy, and you can set your backups up. And those backups are tiered into cool zone redundant storage where available. So obviously not all the Azure regions have zonal redundancy, but where available, those backups are tiered into cool redundant storage. And the snapshots, they're pointers. It's tiny. These things are quite small. There's no additional cost for these snapshots. Again, with Azure Premium Files, you have to factor in the cost for those snapshots as well. Dual protocol volumes, that came in July 2020. One which was interesting as well, and it's a question. Nobody. The one that's interesting as well, that's been a request for other applications, is AZ Snap, which is application consistent snapshots, but it's only at the minute for SAP HANA. The field teams, myself, the guys in the field and customers have been asking, is this going to be introduced for other products? Hopefully it will be soon, but it's massive in the SAP world, the ability to create those application consistent snapshots, the ability to roll them back really quickly.
You're right next to the camera so people can yeah, people have really what you're using. So continuous availability came in earlier this year as well as the SMB shares for FS Logics containers. That was later on in support, but that's the key thing as well. It's supported. So continuous availability is only supported for SQL workloads and FS Logic based workloads. So for AVD, it's quite important to have that enabled.
Yeah, and the one right at the end, which has just been announced into preview, application volume groups, as we said. So application volume groups, the ability to actually create those volumes, pin them close, where you have those low latency. Again, questions to the floor. Those who are using AVD with ANF, have you encountered any performance issues? No? No latency issues? Brian, you said you were using AVD with ANF. Have you encountered any performance issues or any applications which are quite demanding?
So, the two things which I use ANF for is FSL profile containers, as you know.
Yeah.
And then obviously the MSIX attached piece for the apps. They're the two components. And obviously I've mentioned that in my book. And I've also mentioned it in recommendations throughout all the different sessions I've had. And the reason being mainly was the concurrent file handle. But you are right, what you're saying, if you've got an 8 or 12 gig app and you're trying to pull that across multiple session nodes and users at the same time, Azure files will struggle depending on the share and depending on the utilization current standard.
Yeah.
What I have seen as well, where people are using Azure files for file shares, but then in the same repository they've got profile lists and kind of trying to consolidate it.
Yeah.
Then I've seen bizarre patterns and behaviours there. And the other interesting thing, which is I've not seen with ANF, is I always say it's like the weather; it changes. Some days there's no issues, but then on other days there's higher latency than there is. And, you know, you look at the ISP and locally there's no issues, but when you look in the cloud, the latency is higher. So, you know,
so you're actually noticing a latency issue?
Sometimes, yeah. The problem with cloud, though, is I've always said it's unpredictable, right? So
yeah.
I think that's one of the challenges we have to accept in cloud.
And that's what AVG and volume pinning is there to gear up, where those latency issues start to crop up. So you can actually use proximity placement groups with AVG and pin those volumes within the same zone as those machines. That will reduce the latency.
So a couple of use cases where our conversations with larger enterprises is where they're wanting to scale up quicker.
Yeah.
That's where Azure NetApp has probably been more beneficial because you can deal with that capacity. But I'm talking about like these companies that want to scale up in thousands rather than hundreds. And that's kind of where we're not doing any sort of testing, so I can't say whether it's true, but that's kind of where we've been looking at it, where you want to scale quicker.
Yeah.
Scale, large scale rather than small scale, because it can deal with that outload probably better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. There's nothing on my mind. It's just completely slipped. It was to do with the structure of AVD profiles. Do you guys separate the profile from the ODB4 container? Is that a method you use? It's one thing. It's one thing I've seen is used quite well to save money.
So that's a Jim Wild recommendation.
It's like a profile from the
from the office. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. There's a lot of answers to it. It depends if you're going to use Outlook in multiple locations. It depends if you want to switch the office cache to a lower storage tier. It depends if you want to replicate so much data. There's a lot of variables in there. You're right, it's a Jim Wild question.
Right. That's something I've seen employed with certain customers where they deployed initially onto premium storage and it wasn't performance was fine, nothing wrong, it was cost.
That's what you find is right, the office cache, right, is a lot more sort of, it's a lot more constant. What you get to talk with the office cache, so often it's often better to put that on a premium storage there, compared to the profile, which isn't so bad.
Yeah.
But it really depends on what you're trying to achieve there. I mean, for simplicity and management purposes, it's often better to encapsulate the entire container. But I can say definitely there are use cases. I had to do one about 2 years ago where you need to separate it out to fit in with that use case. So the usual consultancy reply, it depends.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Where I've seen it is used where the customer went premium and they just weren't happy with the costs were escalating and it wasn't right. So yeah, they moved so
I find the profile's a lot less bursty than the cache.
Well, it's log on, log off.
Yeah.
So that's where utilising the profiles on the standard storage can actually introduce and drive down some cost savings. Yeah, so the product now is, it's going on for 3 years old. The good news is as well, whilst I can't share it here because it's NDA and roadmap stuff, there is a lot of new features coming as well, which hopefully might make it a more attractive solution in a functionality sense, and also might make it a more cost-effective solution because there are various tiers being introduced to help drive down those costs, as well as, and these are Azure features as well as in bringing storage capability or purchasing capability to lower those costs. So yeah, so to quickly sum up, really, I think the headline thing for me with ANF is simplicity. It's a very simple service to work with. As already highlighted the AD piece, you can consume it on demand. In fact, does anybody do any testing in MSDN or using MSDN subscription for testing? Have you noticed you now can't create an ANF account?
How do I?
You can. Go on, just raise the support ticket and say, what's going on? Why have you stopped this? Please allow it, and they allow it. It's happened so ANF was a gated service until the 4th of October. So you had to be whitelisted to use the service. They removed that whitelisting, and then whatever they've done, they blocked it for benefit accounts. So if you've got MVPs for benefit or MSDN subscriptions, etc., you can't create it. You get a message saying, I think account creation is restricted in region. If you make a support request, and they will just support request, tell them which region you want to use, and they'll allow you to do that. Yeah, so very simplistic service. I think it's efficiency as well, the ability to do dynamic volume shaping, the ability to flex volumes up and down on demand. We can implement a Logic app or even an Azure function to do that for you, or you can indeed do it manually. Cost, again, it's not a cheap service, but you pay for what you get, but it's a very good, reliable service. And if you apply cloud economics to it, it can actually soon become an efficient service for you. And the mobility, the ability to take those enterprise workloads, which are currently running on premises, with performance requirements and move those into Azure relatively simply. It makes life a lot easier. So get started and play with it. I urge you, if you haven't looked at it or haven't played with it, please get into the Azure portal, create yourself an account, create capacity pools, build your volumes. I've also included some useful links if you need at the end. I will put these slides into my GitHub repo if you need them at a later date. Thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time to be here, and any questions, please ask.
Brilliant. Hey everyone. So, this is quite a controversial subject, I think. What I might do is just leave this title slide on and then just get everyone to give me their opinions. So first off, I'm going to ask everyone, is AVD a threat to Citrix and or VMware? What are the thoughts in the room?
How could it be a threat to VMware?
Okay, so when I'm talking about VMware here, I'm talking about VMware EUC.
Again, how is it a threat?
Okay, that's a good question. Anyone else?
It's not a threat.
We'll see.
Personal thoughts are Citrix pretty much had the whole game to themselves for the past
year.
So my personal opinion is obviously, sorry back to me, sorry. Microsoft obviously based on ACI credits, so that's how they make their money. Okay. So for the past 10 years, they've let Citrix go with what they have because simple deployments go to ISH, complicated deployments go to Citrix. Right? That's the way it's always been. Microsoft working with Citrix. Now Microsoft are very much focused on those Azure ACI credits. They want workloads within Azure. Right? So they've massively upped their game in the past couple of years because they want all that money for themselves. Obviously, they still go to Citrix, but they want all that workload for themselves. And I think, obviously, we've seen the stuff from Citrix starting to migrate over to sort of Google Cloud, their stuff. So I think they know the writing's on the wall. And if you look at the feature comparison for Citrix versus sort of AVD a year ago, 18 months ago, and look at it today, it's slowly being chipped away. That's my personal opinion. And
it's a good opinion.
Another 6 months in a year's time, again, it's going to be a completely different.
Well, my personal opinion is if VMware Horizon AUC isn't even a game in town, so you could probably scrub them out. But is it a...
Oh, that's controversial, and I completely disagree. But carry on.
Well, I mean, I've been this for a long time. Let's not say Horizon is in Scotland in health. To be honest. But anyway, Citrix, Microsoft's tanks are on Citrix's lawn. I totally agree with that. They absolutely are. But VMware, yeah, I'm going to think VMware.
Okay, no, I like your opinion. I disagree, but you're allowed to have it. So a little bit of background about me. So some of you here already know me. So I joined IGEL in January of this year. So it's been almost a year since I've been at IGEL.
You call it Eagle.
Yeah. In Germany, yeah, because it's German for hedgehog. Yeah, but over here we call it IGEL. Everywhere else in the world, it's IGEL. So I joined IGEL in January this year, and before I joined IGEL, I was at VMware for 6.5 years, focusing on end-user computing. So everything to do with Watch at the time, through to Workspace ONE, through to Horizon, everything to do with VMware EUC. Before that, I was at Citrix, doing the same stuff, but with a different technology stack. Everything to do with Citrix and Zen Desktop 7 that was released at the time, Zen Server, NetScaler, etc. So it gives me a pretty good insight into what the landscape looks like. And this is one of the reasons I asked this question, because I think this is something that everyone's sort of thinking, but no one has really asked out loud. What does AVD actually mean for Citrix and VMware in this space? Now, when WVD first came out a couple of years ago, I spoke to quite a few people in the industry, and obviously I was at VMware at the time. There was quite a lot of worry. It's probably the best term to put in place, because you all remember, you all use Intune or have implemented Intune. Anyone here using Intune or MEM? Okay, a few of you. Okay. Anyone here using Workspace ONE? Fantastic. Anyone here using Citrix Endpoint Manager? I didn't think so. So at VMware, we had a lot of experience of Microsoft muscling in to a particular field within end-user computing. So obviously, VMware bought AirWatch, they then converted that, turned that into Workspace ONE. Now, Workspace ONE is a lot more than just AirWatch. It's a lot more than just unified endpoint management. But what we saw in this space was that Microsoft, when they really put some investment into a particular field, they can pretty much own the market. And we saw a lot of stuff happen when Intune first came out. So exactly as you just said, Neil, when Intune first came out, we just saw it as sort of a tick box feature. This is a, hey, we're doing the same thing. We're going to do the same thing that AirWatch, that Mobile Iron, that Good have been doing for a long time. And we saw it as a tick box exercise. This is absolute bare minimum, or unkindly enough. Has anyone sort of heard that Microsoft technology to a large extent is good enough? Yeah. You've probably seen that, haven't you? So when Intune first came out, we pretty much thought, well, you know what? It's good enough. But exactly as you said, Neil, given a couple of years, it improved. And so the whole idea, the whole focus on what Workspace ONE was had to change, and it did. And it's now very successful. It was successful. It's changed its general angle, and it's a very successful technology we see in the field. So I asked this question. I asked this question about a month ago. Did any of you vote on this? Probably not. Okay, I asked this question on LinkedIn about a month ago. Is AVD a threat to Citrix and VMware? And this is the answer I got. Now, we've seen 52-48%, quite a lot over the past 6 years or so in the UK, and it's not always a good thing. I don't know where all of you stand on this, but this is what came back. And the interesting thing about this is that for a long time, AVD is a bad thing for Citrix and VMware was winning. Up until the last day, that was roughly 55%, 45% in favour of AVD being a bad thing for Citrix and VMware. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. Does anyone agree with this, first of all?
Well, it entirely depends, really, on how you frame this, right? Because originally AVD was probably good because it was just another way of delivering resources, particularly the Windows 10 multi-session side of things for people. But now that, you know, what the other vendors give, that kind of brokering on top, and that extra value add is made narrowed by Microsoft. We start to feel a bit threatened by it, and Microsoft have the capability to grow much faster than they can develop, and I think that's what they should feel threatened by, Microsoft's capability to grow so much faster than they can develop things.
And I think another part of that is the fact that when you look at AVD, when you look at what Microsoft are doing here, it's the broker. Realistically, I mean, we can forget about Azure for now, we'll come back to that. When you think about what AVD is, it's a broker across to desktops sitting on top of Azure. You think about where Citrix and VMware made their money when it came to VDI, realistically, it's that broker section. You look at Horizon. Horizon, you pay for Horizon, you pay for the broker. You don't pay for vSphere when you've got a Horizon implementation. What Microsoft did here was they came in and said, you know what, we'll give you this section for free. What you're going to pay for is the hosting on top of Azure. The big problem is, if you're Citrix and VMware, how do you compete with free?
Exactly.
That's the problem.
What did Citrix ever have above that until now? They had HTX redirection and single sign-on. And now Microsoft are closing that gap on them very rapidly. So what Citrix, then the onus goes back to the likes of Citrix. What can you bring that's new on top of that? And it's narrowing down that gap.
And
that was always
the gateway element to it, as much as anything. how do you get the users to the thing? Yeah.
Well, this isn't a new problem.
Sure.
Right, so, I mean, when I was at Citrix, and this is probably going back about 8 years or so now, when I was at Citrix, we kept getting asked by customers, what is the blue sky between what Citrix does, especially with NetApp, and what Microsoft does with terminal services and remote desktop services? That's not a particularly difficult conversation to have. When Microsoft was just doing terminal services back in the day, it was easy. It's not scalable. It's not easy to manage. It doesn't do VDI. A lot of that has gone away.
There's also another point of Ben, where a lot of executives in these high-end organizations stick to logos. They don't understand the technology, and it's a logo thing rather than a product services technology thing.
Yeah, so let's add another equation to this. Windows 365. Okay.
I'm going to get to that. You just hold on. I'm going to get to that. But no, go on.
Well, so what we're going to see over the next year is Microsoft putting even more focus on Windows 365 than AVD. Okay, we can tell by the marketing that's happening and stuff like that. So I'm estimating, I'm guessing here, we've already seen the hibernation thing, which I presume was paid for Windows 365. Microsoft, they're going to develop Windows 365 features, and that will also make its way down to AVD as well. And they're putting even more money, even more developers, even more focus on Windows 365 than they did on AVD. So personally, that ball is going to keep rolling and rolling and rolling.
Yeah, so the marketing for 365 is so strong.
Yeah, so just to answer that, so Windows 365 in terms of a product family, Microsoft sits inside of the MEM, which is a big area, lots of investment, lots of developers. It's become a component inside of that family and gets a lot of marketing because they're very, very good at that. AVD is a feature that sits on top of Azure, public cloud, completely different product group. Obviously, they go up to the same point at some point, but they are completely different products. So they have a different view of the world.
Yeah.
So Windows 365 is deliberately made to look very slick, and it is, to be fair. It's very, very simple.
I like it.
But it's a different use case, different product group. Now, what Azure brings, so Hibernate, for example, is a product that came into Azure, nothing to do with AVD, nothing to do with Windows 365. It's an Azure Compute component that Azure Compute would have developed and brought to market on their own. It's just that AVD and Windows 365 bring a lot of virtual machines to Azure, and thus they become the key products that go and consume that new feature.
You see, there's a key point that you mentioned there. Coming back to, and I'll come to that very shortly. I agree with this. AVD is good for Citrix and VMware. And the reason is something that you just mentioned, Tom. The reason is Microsoft's marketing engine. That is the big thing. Go back 10 years or so, and I remember seeing a stat that said that, I mean, we're all here in or involved with end-user computing, and it's easy to think, hey, VDI or published applications, everyone's doing it, it's huge. Actually, it's not. Going back 8-10 years or so, VDI and published applications had about a 12% market penetration. 12%, that's nothing. It seems like a lot more to us because we're heavily involved in end-user computing, but realistically, across the industry, it's not very big at all. So my argument here is that actually, now that Microsoft has joined the fray and is now pushing VDI, and especially Windows 365, I think that's very important, that message around the capabilities of DAS, around desktop as a service, around VDI, is now being taken up much more by the market. So my entire argument here is, even though there's now a new competitor in this space, a big, very, very big competitor with lots and lots of cash to spend, even though market share might disappear from the likes of VMware and Citrix, because the market is going to grow massively, I've got some stats to back this up, actually everyone is going to win.
To be fair though, Ben, I've seen it from the opposite side James has seen. I've seen quite a lot of VMware activity.
Yeah.
Even though James would agree, I'm happy to.
I've seen loads.
Share notes.
No, out of interest, right? So big enterprises, very much Citrix. Mid-market, very much VMware. That's been my experience across both.
I work predominantly in finance, so I'm probably going to...
Oh yeah, finance, Citrix. Almost completely Citrix. Healthcare in the UK.
Well, that's what I'm saying. In Scotland, they're all healthcare that's dealt with in
but also the whole of the UK, the whole of the NHS is pretty much VMware. I think there's 1 or 2 Citrix implementations. But it's not just that, it's mid-market, SMEs, mainly VMware. Citrix has got the big B. Sorry, go on, Ryan.
That's what very much I was saying. I was saying that from what they talk about, well, obviously I've worked with both Citrix and Microsoft and VMware. We produce these kind of you know, Azure Virtual Desktop integration, you know, bedded together marketing, as we'll put it. And out of all of them, I've got to say this, that VMware, forgive me here, VMware is $1 more than Nerdio. And if you've already got an on-premise environment, universal license allows you to scale out. So from a scale out perspective, the benefit is that you can add additional resource and consumption into the cloud without affecting your on-premises and still deliver the same sort of ecosystem for end-user computing. However, if you were to kind of redesign and re-architect your end-user computing model for virtual desktops, then you would probably move directly to Azure Virtual Desktop.
So what I'm not doing in this session is saying which one is better.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're exactly right. Depending on the customer, I've seen customers, greenfield customers, look at AVD, look at Nerdio, potentially, and then think, well, you know what, I'm going to go for these because they're known in this market. I've seen greenfield go for directly onto native AVD. I've seen people with Citrix or organizations with Citrix and VMware go to AVD with Nerdio. I've seen everything. People doing all sorts of different things. It depends on the enterprise. I'm not going to call out any of them to be better than the other right now because that's a fool's game. We're coming back to the marketing thing. Does anyone remember back in July when the BBC put this article on when Windows 365 got released? It was amazing, and it made me laugh because there was this one little snippet that said Windows 365 will work similarly to game streaming, where the computing is done in a data center somewhere remotely and streamed to a device. It was almost as if BBC was saying, look what Microsoft's done. They've invented this completely new technology which is similar to game streaming. Irrespective of the fact that Citrix has been doing this for 30 years. But that's exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about marketing. This was news to a lot of people in the industry. And I get that we're in EUC, we're involved with EUC, we understand the industry, but there's a lot of organizations out there who don't actually know about this stuff. Which is, again, one of the reasons that I say that Microsoft and AVD is very, very good for Citrix and VMware in this space. With me so far? Agree? Disagree? Oh, I've got some faces over here. Why is this? No, I'm going to. Don't worry about that. So obviously, we've seen a lot of stuff happen over the past 18 months or so. I don't even have to call out the fact, but I'm going to. The pandemic has caused a lot of interest in end-user computing. And I keep saying to people, the next 10 years is going to be very, very, very good for people in end-user computing. It's going to be great for Microsoft, obviously. It's going to be great for VMware, it's going to be great for Citrix, it's going to be great for everyone involved in the EUC space and everyone who is working with EUC technology. And we're seeing that. We're seeing huge adoption of VDI, we're seeing huge adoption of DAS type technologies, we're seeing huge adoption of AVD. That's just a fact. That's exactly what's happening. What we're also seeing is that the market is growing massively as well. And this is the difference. This is the key difference compared to what was happening maybe 10 years ago. 10 years ago, VDI, published applications, again, wasn't as big as you might think it was. So I've got some information here, some stats. Over the next 5 years, it's estimated we'll see 17% compound annual growth rate for VDI. 17% a year, which is huge. For any technology stack, but for any technology stack, that's huge. Market size reached 30 billion by 2026. Go on.
I'll give you a real. Is that the year of VDI that we'll be hearing about?
Oh,
it's never really happened.
Bingo.
No, the Microsoft involved not believe it.
It could happen. It could happen. This is the thing. But I wouldn't say that. I'm not going to say that because that will jinx it.
No, I was going to say the real world scenario that I've been exposed into is very much the case of anything VDI, virtual, whatever, all of a sudden is trusted from onboarding many third parties. So even where I'm at, we would quite happily ship laptops left, right, and centre to a project. New project comes along, 10 people from KPMG, Deloitte, wherever, whoever it was, we'll send them a laptop. We'll send them a laptop, we'll send them a laptop, send them a laptop. That's gone. All gone. Totally gone. All of a sudden, the trust is there that we can deliver.
What changed?
COVID.
Okay.
Because COVID then allowed the belief from the senior management that all this stuff in the EEC space virtually that we've been talking about for years and years and years, oh, it actually works.
Yes.
That was what happened. It works. It actually works.
We've been saying this for 20, 30 years.
Absolutely.
Well, this is really 10,000 people here overnight. What we did is we went,
yeah.
oh shit.
I was talking to DWP about 4 or 5 months ago, I was talking to one of the guys who was in charge of one of the projects there, and they said when all this kicked off in March last year, early April, they ordered 70,000 laptops, sent all their staff home.
Well, they
and
tried.
gave them
They couldn't got them. They tried.
PWP actually got hold of a big chunk of them.
Well, that's what most companies did. They
Yeah.
tried. And they all got miserable. Yeah.
But what this guy was saying was, before COVID, it wasn't even on their roadmap to do anything.
Because the
like
separation between the physical teams and the virtual teams was
Yeah.
so much so. You know, like I said, we ramped up from 300 people to 5,000 people overnight.
Did you look like an absolute legend to the business?
Well, we still.
There you go. We saw that. So at VMware, we saw that all over the place.
Yeah.
Local government, especially. There was one group of local government, one local government organisation. I can tell you who they are, but they had exactly the same problem.
But immediately overnight, that kind of, we're going to give a shitload of laptops.
Well, we've got them up and running in a week.
Went out the window.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's pointless doing it. Why have we
BYO.
ever done it? Why have we ever done it?
Exactly. That's sort of my argument when it comes to. I mean, that's a whole other conversation around traditional way of working compared to the new way of working.
And the speed of onboarding people is therefore so much quicker. As soon as you've got an identity, we can get you connected.
Acquisitions as well.
2 weeks, 3 weeks to get a device.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so we know this. People who work in end user computing know how powerful it can be. It's just that it seems like the rest of the world has caught up. So you're right. Trust. Trust is really important. At first, there's no other choice. People had to do this stuff, and that's definitely one of the inputs into this growth that we're going to see over the next few years. But also the fact that there's now another big vendor in this space who are actively pushing it. Microsoft never pushed terminal services, unless you know any difference on.
No, we didn't really, and there was a very sensible, logical reason for that.
Wasn't very good.
Well, it was. It was serious. That's the point. It was good enough.
Yeah, good enough. There we
Good
go.
enough. And we had Citrix that were effectively selling for Microsoft. So every time Citrix made a sale, the customer also bought Windows licenses for RDS. So why on earth would we, it's Microsoft's a business, so if you've got another company making sales on your behalf, why would you rock that apple cart, so to speak?
Exactly.
Now, that hasn't changed, to be fair, going forward. Microsoft Business is now consumption of Office 365 and Azure.
Yeah.
So if there's companies that are selling their product, which brings workloads to Azure, that is ultimately good for Microsoft.
Oh,
So
we're seeing that everywhere.
Also, you're quite have a series to sell the on-premises licenses as well, rather than the cloud.
yeah.
Doesn't Microsoft have shares in Citrix as well? And that's
It
what
did.
they
I
got.
don't know.
No.
Yeah, Microsoft also had shares in VMware, so did Cisco.
And Apple, so
So let's go back to this. How many times have you seen the BBC talk about Citrix with VMware and announce a major product offering from one of those players? Never. I've never seen that. But Microsoft comes out with this new solution that's aimed at the mass market, and all of a sudden, that's amazing marketing.
Microsoft actually had the website.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's a political discussion. Probably shouldn't. So what we see now is the fact that Microsoft are now really pushing this particular part of EUC, pushing it massively. And the market and the industry and everyone else is taking note of that. So even though there's this new, aggressive is probably the wrong word, this new forward-focused competitor in the market is growing. And when we see this, $30 billion US, that's from a standing start of $11.7 billion last year. So that's 250% growth potentially over the next 5 years, which is huge. Again, this is huge for any industry. And it's not just on, by the way, I was going to call out.
Do you think that's realistic though? I mean, who makes this?
I think that's very realistic. Again, EUC, for the whole 18 months, the most important technology stack that everyone's been talking about, again, maybe it's just because I'm sheep dipped in this stuff, is end user computing. That's what everyone's been talking about. If it wasn't for Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, the last 18 months would have been even worse than they have been.
Yeah, I mean, I saw one comment which sums up perfectly. So VDI used to be niche, probably about 10-15% of the market. Now VDI is mainstream.
I would still argue it probably isn't anywhere bigger than 20%. There's so much more market to go after. And again, this is my argument. At the moment, the VDI penetration is probably very, very small. What we do see as good penetration in the market is unified endpoint management. Everyone I talk to, every organization I talk to has got some form of UEM in place. That's because they had to. They needed to have a way to manage iOS devices and Android and Mac and Windows and Linux and everything else. We see that everywhere, but VDI is still a small part. Has anyone else seen that?
It's because full-fat VPN is still absolutely the favoured approach. And, you know, back to what we were saying, it was a stopgap because they couldn't get the devices to allow everyone to have a laptop at home to give them VPN. And the VPN concentrators had 4,500 concurrent users and we needed 15,000.
I was literally start
That's exactly what it sounds. It was a stopgap to, and still VPN is still prevalent everywhere in the market.
You're right, absolutely. One of the big things.
Garden kind of concept is still.
If you think about it, though, if you think about it logically, VPN is a really sort of old approach to this sort of stuff. I mean, having to get access to maybe Citrix Desktop through a VPN, you look at that as a techie, you look at that and you think, oh, I'd rather not do that. But we still see it quite a lot. And off the back of that, slightly off the subject, off the back of that, we're now seeing a lot of SD-WAN and SASE conversations in the market. Because that's probably a better way to do things. You're all familiar with SASE, Secure Access Service Edge type technology. So it seems like every EUC vendor has got a SASE method, apart from Microsoft. Don't know. Has got a SASE message at the moment, which is all about an easier way to get access to your cloud desktop, so your cloud services. We're seeing that everywhere. But the whole point of this is, again, the fact that even though Microsoft is now in the market, even though Microsoft is really pushing a solution, this is good for Citrix and VMware because it's growing the market. And it's growing the market at a huge rate every year. And I think we're going to see that growth continue. I mean, this is only a 5-year plan. We're going to see that growth continue massively. The other piece that we're seeing as well, I think this is going back to probably your point, Neil, is that the only way that Citrix and VMware can really make headroads is by partnering with Microsoft. That's the way to do it now. Rather than competing with that message, rather than competing with the AVD message, the best thing to do is to partner with Microsoft. We're seeing VMware do that. So VMware delivering services on top of Azure. We're seeing Citrix do that as well. So their cloud solution, the main thrust of the cloud solution is on top of Azure. So have Citrix Cloud on Azure makes a lot of sense. There's something else I do apologise about. Yeah, no worries.
Unfortunately, getting to the east coast of England is not very easy, and so thank you for your cheers, guys. Take care.
No worries, take care. That's fine. So we're seeing Citrix do this as well. Citrix partnering with Microsoft to put this message, and that makes perfect sense when it comes to Azure, when it comes to making sure there's a strategy for the future. And I really like this. This is Satya Nadella, and you've probably all seen this as well. This is Citrix and Microsoft. I know you can all read. I'm going to read it anyway. The Citrix and Microsoft partnership is an industry success story where both organisations are able to serve customers well together and be successful together. It's that trusted success that comes with our shared focus on customers. This is Microsoft standing up on the stage with Citrix and saying, look, you know what? We love Citrix. We want to partner with you. Microsoft has got very, very good at that. Don't know what your view is, Tom, under Satya Nadella. Very good. In fact, our CEO, Jed Ayres of iGel, got up on stage with Scott Manchester back in 2019 and talking about the joint Microsoft and iGel partnership to bring Linux-based client access into AVD. It's everywhere. We're seeing Microsoft partner with everyone. And the reason is, we know this, the reason is to get as many people as possible onto Azure. That's the end goal. Whatever the particular path is, that's the end goal. So, when I joined iGel, I put this together. And this is sort of a pyramid of power. And the idea behind this is to call out all of the key topics in end-user computing right now. So we've got digital workspace, identity and access management, digital employee experience management, SaaS, DaaS, everything else that you see in there is a key topic. Is there anything I'm missing, do you think? I hope not. I mean, I've tested this with Citrix, with VMware, with Microsoft, with customers. And they all agree it's pretty much everything in the industry right now when it comes to end-user computing. These are all the hot topics. The one piece I haven't got in there at the moment is this. So this is where I start talking a bit about iGel. Sorry?
I was just about to say Agile.
There we go. iGel. Ooh, you would have been right. Well done. So, iGel. And the reason I called this out, the reason I put this together is because at first, when I got to iGel, I was trying to think, what's the best way of calling out what iGel actually fits into an EUC solution? It's sort of here. Because no matter what solution you've got, you still need to have an endpoint, you still need to have an operating system to consume these services. And this is where iGel comes in, sort of the glue to build the solution around. If you want to get access to AVD, you can use iGel as the launch pad. If you want to get access to, go on, Neil.
What about Tenzing?
Who? Anyway, So then you've got SaaS applications as well. Tenzig, yeah, that's an interesting one. Don't see them very often.
Give me 3 headshots and I'll promote you.
Say that again.
Give me 3 headshots and I'll promote you.
I've got, you know what? In my garage, 10 minutes away, I've got 101 of the little of the headshots. If you want one, I will give you like 50 of them. They squeak as well. Yeah, so the whole point of Agile is to act as a launchpad into these different solutions, these different services that your users need to get access to. That's what it's all about. And then when it comes to what a workspace looks like these days, it's not just about VDI anymore. It's not just about DAS, it's not just about Citrix, Microsoft, VMware, AWS, all those other DAS providers. It's about all the other applications as well. I know we focused a lot today on Windows, virtual Windows applications. At VMware, we have this really horrible American term. It's the Americans one, I'm sorry. Really horrible Americanism. And we said that VDI, what you're doing with VDI, apologies, is SaaSifying your Windows apps. It's horrible, isn't it? But the idea is you are turning your Windows applications and desktops into a SaaS service. And really, that's true. That's what you're doing. You're making it software as a service. You're making your desktop a service that you can consume from anywhere. You're breaking that link between the application that you're offering and the endpoint. That's what it looks like these days. VDI, SaaS-based applications, consuming them from anywhere. So again, that's where Agile comes in. So when it comes to the ecosystem, we have full integrations with all these guys. We've got great relationships with Citrix, with Microsoft, with VMware, with Nerdio. Put your icon in there, Neil. Look, your logo. With Nutanix. We've got great relationships with hardware vendors as well. I mean, three of those vendors on the screen, those are hardware vendors, you can actually get devices straight from them with IGLOS on top. HP is one of those vendors. Probably either the biggest or the second biggest endpoint vendor in the world. You can get IGLOS on those endpoints. And then there's everyone else out there as well. I mean, we've got an Agile-ready map of well over 100 different vendors that we integrate with. This is the difference when it comes to Agile. We integrate with all these different players. If you want to have an employee experience platform, like Controller, we'll integrate with it. If you want to have identity management, we'll integrate with Ridian or Imprivato. So we are the core of a lot of these different solutions. Any questions? Does anyone agree with me now that AVD is good for Citrix and VMware? I'm looking at you.
I'm not convinced.
Sorry?
I'm not convinced.
Go on, give me a reason.
I was just trying to help my side.
To be honest, I'll pad this back the airwaves. It's like, you know, I said logos earlier, but let's look at it at a different angle. It's like ice cream. Everybody likes a different flavour. You might like a couple of them, but you know, sometimes it's also about preference, what people prefer. It doesn't mean that people are going to go with AVD just because it's the most popular. There might be something specific in one of the other vendors they prefer. It's like you don't have to use Nerdio, but people choose to use Nerdio because it makes their lives easier and they can do more cost analysis on the basic platform. People use VMware to scale out from on-premise environments. People use Citrix as they're told to by the boss. You know, there's all these different
it's got to be
things, right? It is.
I mean, a lot of the projects I'm involved in, a lot of people are looking at AVD and trying to assess whether it is as good as the Citrix platform that they've got now. And there are, as I said, it entirely depends on what they've solved with the Citrix platform before that, and what depends on that. I mean, for instance, a lot of them, you give them AVD, they go, oh, this is great, you know, we do this, that. They go, yeah, but there's no fucking single sign-on, right? So they go, oh my God, that's shit, right, we can't have that. And Microsoft are slowly catching up with these sorts of gaps, and that's the sort of thing that's got to be done. You've got to assess how much of a dependency you have on those Citrix features.
What if?
Right now.
What if 10 years' time? Who do you think will be the leader?
I think in about 3 years' time, you see, what you get with Microsoft is you get kind of, like you said, a tipping point, right? For instance, Dropbox versus OneDrive. Dropbox used to be great, OneDrive was utter shit, right?
Teams and Slack.
Exactly the same thing, which I was going to come in, right? OneDrive has reached a stage now where it's not shit enough that you can justify.
That's a good tagline. Do you know that?
Saving the money by not paying for like Dropbox. That's it. It's the same with Slack and Teams. Teams is still shit, right, compared to Slack, but you don't have to pay for Teams, and it's now not annoyingly shit enough that you can get
enough. I like that.
Pay the extra money. And that's where you'll reach with AVD. That is exactly where you'll reach. And I think it's up to Citrix and VMware to come up with something different. Right? I know I'm a CT person, so I can't say too much about what I know about the roadmap, but I know Citrix are working on some things that do offer things that Microsoft don't have, but a company the size of Microsoft won't take that long to catch up.
If they've got the interest, I would say. Again, going back to what you said, Tom, at first it was very much, let Citrix do the selling for us. And now Microsoft have got to the point where, you know, AVD is actually very good with Nerdio, is really, really good. But do they want to sort of steamroller Citrix? I don't think that's.
I've heard there's some kind of gentleman's agreement that they'll leave the Citrix on-premises stuff and they'll chase the cloud things for now. But I think the sensible thing, and this might sound controversial for Microsoft to do, would just be to consume Citrix, just to take them and take all of their stuff and just load it straight into AVD, if that's what they want. But I've also heard things about how many people actually work on AVD in Microsoft, which surprised me about how small the teams are. So I'm not entirely sure how serious they are about it.
I'll give you another example, right? Coming back to the whole Intune piece, okay? So when we first got Workspace ONE out of VMware, we had to go out there and we had to talk to customers and we had to tell them the why. This is why you need to do UEM. That was the biggest part of the sales cycle. You need to do Unified Endpoint Management because it's secure. You can secure your devices, manage them from a single console. It's going to be easier and more convenient. When Microsoft came out with Intune and you know, bundled it in for free, we didn't have to do the why anymore because the market understood the why because Microsoft had told them the why. So the why piece is gone. It became very much a why VMware, why Citrix. And so I think what you end up with is a default. If people don't go in and talk about the added benefits of Citrix and VMware, organizations will default to Microsoft. And that's where you have to sell the USPs.
Would you say that it's obviously beneficial for revenue for Citrix and VMware because the market's bigger?
Yeah.
Does it stop innovation and new features within the market? Microsoft, for example, like you said,
I think it drives innovation.
They've got Azure AD, but they've got these features ready to integrate. How can the Citrix and VMware compete when they don't have that product stack which can be converted to be used within that end user computer? So how can they innovate at the same rate and compete, say, in 10 years' time, when Microsoft's built all of their current offering and so on?
That's assuming that Citrix and VMware stay still. You look at what VMware are doing right now with their employee experience engine, with their SASE, and when you look at the latest IDC for SASE and SD-WAN, it was Cisco and VMware. Microsoft were very far back, and Citrix were a bit part player. When you look at the other vendors out there, they are innovating. This is driving innovation because the only way to compete is to keep innovating. If you don't innovate, you'll just stay as a legacy vendor. We're seeing Citrix and VMware innovate in this space. They have to.
So I think what you're going to end up seeing is bigger market share from Microsoft. Okay, so Citrix is always.
They are going to take market share from Citrix and VMware, but a bigger market.
Yeah, VMware is always going to be around, and Citrix will be.
Yeah, I agree.
So people pay a high premium for the features that they give them. Okay, that's always been the case, but now Microsoft, for most customers, is good enough. Right? You'll go back to that good enough question.
Yeah.
Right? Previously, probably 10% were good enough, 9% over Citrix. Now, it may be 50% good enough on AVD and then 50% good enough on Citrix or VMware. So, seeing that bigger market share, that will continue to go, but there'll always be that top end, be 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, which will need those extra features that VMware specifically, which you pay for.
Well, I'm wondering how many new customers Citrix could get. I mean, in the Citrix sales, if I say, all I say is renewals. I don't say any new customers. Any greenfield customers come along and just looking at like.
Yeah, but that's because of features, not just the way the Citrix.
Well,
they
don't. It's too expensive, or they don't know what the features are. But in a real life, all I say is renewals.
But
what about new contenders as well? Market new contenders.
I don't think you will get new contenders. Look at UEM, Unified Endpoint Management.
Got Nerdio, which is
So I wouldn't say it's a new contender.
Some of the likes of Citrix Cloud, they're a rattler on top.
Look what happened to Good. Look what happened to Mobile Iron. There's only realistically two vendors now in the UEM space. It's Microsoft and VMware. That's it. There won't be any new contenders because that market's done. That market's finished. It's a saturation.
What if they do? If they come with the USP, they can just get consumed.
Potentially, yeah. Well, yeah. This is it. I suppose the other question, the other piece here that you guys have raised, you're seeing a lot of greenfield, and again, I think that's down to Microsoft. Microsoft have made it cool now to embrace VDI. So seeing a lot of greenfield organisations out there who wouldn't have been greenfield VDI without Microsoft getting involved in the market. The question is, will those greenfield customers who may go onto AVD at some point go to Citrix and VMware? Will they see those USPs and decide? Exactly the same.
I just see a customer go to AVD.
It's early days though, isn't it?
I go on Citrix. Obviously,
It's very early days.
let me
Just to tell you what happens when we go to speak to our customers.
Yeah.
They are the largest customers out there. 95% of them are Citrix, and the remainder is VMware and others.
And that's because they're the largest customers out there.
Exactly.
I think.
Yeah. I would say, in my personal experience speaking to customers, that of those Citrix customers, probably again 90% of them have asked us,
Yeah.
can we remove Citrix? Now they're asking that purely from an economical
Yeah.
perspective.
Right. Okay.
It's not that they dislike it. It's not that it's not serving a purpose. It's we've got this stack of line items of cost in our virtual desktop. If I can remove one and save whatever, I want to do it.
You're talking about that's on every single one of the customers have the AVD POC going on right now.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, none of the VMware customers ever asked that, and that, I think that's because VMware own the
Data center.
the data center. So there's no value really in the customer taking VMware out. So they seem to have a much closer relationship. But what I would say is, to answer James' question, that the AVD team is tiny. It is surprisingly small inside of, and that's because we've had Citrix and VMware.
Makes sense.
We absolutely do not view Citrix as competitors of us, and we don't directly compete with them. But we're in this market where the customers are asking, can we take Citrix out? So the customers view it as very much a competition. Whereas we, and I'm saying this honestly, we do not deliberately try to compete. Our roadmap of features that we're bringing, nothing to do with Citrix, is what our customers are asking for. Now, to be fair,
Why are customers asking for that?
they are asking for things that Citrix deliver, but we don't say, right, Citrix do this, we need to do it. We look at a list of customers asking for this feature, like Azure AD join, that was the number one, so we spent most of our time delivering that and got that out the door. So I think your question is missing one word, and is AVD a good opportunity for Citrix and VMware? They need to up their game to bring value out that we're not getting out of the door quick enough.
And they're all, it's going to turn into an arms race.
Just on that front.
Tech is an arms race.
For them in particular, this is
Before it wasn't, and now it is.
AWS potentially with Citrix, VMware, all the vendors.
Well,
where they
Citrix-
can get adopted
Citrix
to like AVD, where it's just one
I only
concept.
mentioned AWS on my workspaces, it's been on for a while.
A bit like that, I was within Azure, I was getting some service, how Google or Amazon will they potentially.
Well, we always suspect that Google are going to buy Citrix and then bundle that up into their virtual.
It used to be
They
Cisco.
really
It used to be
haven't.
Cisco. Cisco's going to buy Citrix. Never
There's a
happened.
lot of room to spend on what Microsoft's going to do.
Yeah, we won't buy.
question though, Tom. So you mentioned obviously most customers turn around to you and ask you, can we take Citrix? So wind back 3 years ago, wind back today. How many of those customers would you now turn around and say to, yes, AVD is good enough compared to what you said 3 years ago?
Well, I was saying earlier, we had joint marketing exercise, marketing exercise between Citrix and Mashford. We came up with this, the top 10 value add that Citrix provide on top of AVD.
The book.
that list has whittled down to roughly 4 or 5, where Citrix absolutely deliver this capability that we do. So our conversations with the customer is always, it's up to you. You choose. If you need something that's on that list of what was 10 and is now 4, our recommendation is go Citrix Cloud all day long. Just do it. Don't waste any time. Just go there. If you don't need anything that's on there, well, now you've got to decide: do you want to spend lots of money with Citrix, or do you want to spend less money with AVD and buy the bullet that you won't get?
So I think that's the key difference, because that conversation now is a lot easier conversation to have, right? Before the share answer was no. Now it's, if you tick these boxes, then the answer is yes.
Yeah. And that applies to VM. We have exactly the same conversation about VM.
There is one what's been missed out of all of this, and obviously it was my kind of area of expertise, was the RDS, native RDS. And believe it or not, the amount, I know, tell me about it, the amount of people still using it today. And we're not talking about just, really small businesses. Some might be airlines, and some might be large financial institutes are using native RDS and have not made that jump yet for whatever reason. They won't go into the VMware stack. They won't go into the.
When I said terminal services, I meant RDS as well.
Yeah, well, there's a massive market for that. So when you were saying that, what's the market today? People haven't made that step into the cloud systems either. From native RDS. So a lot of people still want to set the server session host, the RDS CALs, and that horrible brokerage, which has got a memory leaking, as we all know, which kind of breaks every couple of weeks.
The consensus in the group.
It's the customer requirements. If it meets the requirements, that's good enough.
Well, this is it.
Microsoft to do what they've done ever since it started. They're democratizing technology. Taking the VDI was only really affordable to the large enterprises up to a point. Now, as it is with Azure, put your credit card in, you can consume it. They did the same with the PC, they did it with the server.
Well, Microsoft's sort of unofficial tagline is the second mouse gets the cheese. Realistically, let someone else build the market and Microsoft will come in and sort of dominate it. And I think that's probably what's happening. So the consensus in the room then, is it that AVD is bad for the other vendors? What is the consensus?
It depends.
It depends.
Depends whether they take this opportunity and do something with it.
Okay. All right.
The vendors.
Yeah.
Oh, I have asked the vendors. Interesting. I'm not going to tell you who, but I'd say 50-50 vendors, Citrix, VMware, and Microsoft, voted for both of those.
Yeah.
We had some Citrix, VMware, and Microsoft people voting AVD is bad for other vendors.
I actually love them because
they're being honest.
yeah,
Fair
exactly.
play to them.
There's opportunity and threat in whichever way you look at it.
Yeah.
These salespeople, by any chance?
Yeah, these were techies. These were some of them were consultants.
Are we asking sales teams?
The sales teams are probably the ones that swung it in favour, to be honest.
Well, there's
Politics.
opportunity, right? That's the way it goes.
Well, my view is, look, if it wasn't for competition, you wouldn't need salespeople, you wouldn't need SEs. It's good to have competition, because then you've got to really sort of high your trade from
Yes, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what's driving Citrix's roadmap now. They're developing a lot of stuff on the security side, which looks really fucking cool. And if they bring that to market, I'll be like, yeah, you're ahead of Microsoft there. And the reason they're doing that is because Microsoft do have their tax part.
Well, I saw some of that stuff on their launchpad. It looks very, very good. I like
Yes.
a lot of what Citrix is developing.
There's one part that I did say, as I said on the roadmap, I can't talk about it, but I saw that, I thought, that's fucking brilliant. Bring that to market, and I'll
Citrix on a good day is unbeatable.
Yeah, exactly. They've got some good patent there, and that's why I can't understand the cutbacks that they've made in the last month or so, because they've trimmed a lot of the good patents.
Maybe the question should have been, is Microsoft AVD a threat, or is Microsoft a threat to traditional VDI technologies at Citrix and VMware? Because you're right, there's other technology stacks within Citrix and VMware which are outside of VDI, which still play into EUC, that Microsoft is not currently competing with.
Like I said, all the time, but if there are needs for other vendors, one vendor can't fill everything, they never ever will.
And the problem with that question is the word traditional. So traditional, today's traditions will be tomorrow's legacy.
Yeah.
So you can't stand still, unfortunately. And RDS and ZAP and all of these kinds of stuff. It was a slow burner, wasn't it? But now the public cloud's come along, that all of these times have now been significantly reduced. So the time it takes to change has gone from
the risk of change and the cost of change has decreased massively.
Exactly.
I think James nailed it there. It was innovation and USP is what's key really for the vendor. So if they maintain, and Tom really said the same thing, if they maintain that, then AVD will be good for vendors because you keep up with times, you offer a new USB on top of the stack. You said SASE, Microsoft doesn't currently have SASE, so the likes of iBoss could plug into that, so on and so forth. So for me, obviously I work in vendor land now, briefly, on the edge of the cusp, but it's all about innovation at the end of the day for us. We offer something no one else does, so we have a USP in the market, and people are rapidly able to learn the name of the likes of Acure because of what we're trying to achieve, and I think that's the message really: innovate or die.
I'll agree. Okay, that's the answer then, isn't it? Innovate or die. If you innovate, it's good. If you don't innovate, you're going to be left behind because Microsoft's driving the market.
It's a similar problem we've had with some of our core sellers when we used to sell it to the masses.
get them to push deals into the cloud. You just tell them, if you don't do it, someone else will. That's If you don't do it, someone else will. I generally think AVD is a huge opportunity for the developers. To overlay management platform, have your USBs, have your customers who, the banks, for instance, who are very Citrix orientated, they will probably continue to use Citrix as long as it's within the budget and it's delivering what they need.
Well, the finance industry, they're looking at it, but at the end of the day, it's all about the applications, right? And that is the key thing. I mean, I say this every day, but I don't give a shit about anything else. It's just about how we deliver the applications. And if AVD allows us to deliver the applications, then fucking great. If Citrix allows us to do it, then great. But that is the key. It's all about applications.
Brilliant. You can have the final word on that then. Okay. Brilliant. Really good discussion. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully that wasn't too controversial. I think that ship has sailed, isn't it? Nice one. Thanks, guys.
Oh, so yeah, we need to have conversations about that all the time.
So, thanks everyone for coming today. It's been good, bad. It's been really good.
Really good deal.
For the first event.
Yeah, pizza was amazing.
I'm not quite sure how I can beat that next time, to be honest with you. If there's a next time, what's
More pizza.
Okay. Challenge accepted. But thanks everyone for coming. Brilliant and conversation stuff, and that is exactly why we have in-person events like this, because you can't have conversations about virtual sessions, stuff like that. So this is why we do this. Okay. So hopefully next time we'll bring them back and we'll do stuff.
I'll come up with another controversial question. Who's better, me or
Yeah.
I'll think of another controversial content.
It's good to think around the industry, like, I've been in NetApp for about 2 years, and from a background of VMware, AVD, and Citrix, it's got more support, all the technologies, so all the work we've done is over 2 years. So here in recent Citrix, over areas,
Exactly. Cool. Well, thanks everyone.